Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our special meeting for our City Council Budget Workshop. In compliance with state legislative and executive actions responding to the COVID-19 emergency, this City Council special meeting is being held in a hybrid format with in-person, telephonic, and virtual options for public viewing and participation. All individuals must wear face coverings when they're not eating and practice social distancing from non-household members. Just general information for everybody that is viewing this. This workshop is an informal meeting involving discussion between and among the City Council and city staff regarding presentations and strategies. These workshops may involve presentations, feedback, brainstorming, etc., regarding further work to be done by the staff or on key policy matters. No action is being taken, but consensus may be to bring it back to a future council meeting. With that, I'm calling this City Council workshop to order. And Krista, if you, well, we're not having to call the roll, so I will look for approval of agenda from council.
Second.
It's been moved by Krista, seconded by Jennifer for approval of the agenda, and I'll just call for all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The agenda has been approved. Before we go into items of discussion, I just want to thank each of you, council and staff, for being here, taking time away from your family on Saturday for this important meeting for budget. It is helps everybody to get this done on a Saturday so that we can move forward as a city to do what's right for our community, our residents, and our region. So I really appreciate everything that you've done up to this point and bringing this forward to us. And this is a very good balanced budget that is being presented to us. So I'm looking forward to some great discussions today. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our fearless leader, Regan.
Don't know how fearless I am right now. Thank you. Well, it's always wonderful to be here, and I really appreciate these opportunities for us as staff to be able to share with council the work that we put in to present to you a balanced budget that we believe meets the priorities and the needs that the council sets. I want to thank Brian for being here. Selena, when we hired her, had a prior commitment to be gone today. So Brian was the lucky one in community development to be able to join us today and present with that. So we'll go ahead and get into it then. As normal, we'll each present on our different departments, and then at the end review some major budget decisions that we need to discuss today, and then open it up to forecasting and council deliberations on what we presented. So if you want to open that up, thanks, Krista. We'll start going through it here. Okay. So as I shared in the budget message, our development strategies really is, as I started putting this together and working with Casey, was to bring our staffing levels up to appropriate levels that we felt needed to be there. We had, as you know, a hiring freeze. We've had some transition that we haven't filled those positions. And so we have been, it feels like flying by the seat of our pants for the last year. And there's been a lot of that going on. So the hope is through this budget to be able to fill a lot of those vacancies. And then also to be IT ready and prioritize cybersecurity is so crucial. And as we've read about in the news and heard about cities and private organizations being compromised, this is just essential that we make sure we put in some capital up front to help preserve our IT integrity. Continue to build up our reserve funds was a really important one for me this year. As you recall, about 5 or 6 years ago, we set a policy that excess revenues that come in above what we budgeted will stick into priority reserve funds. And the result of that has been fantastic. We've been able to purchase our town center property, a lot of park property, do some work at the Aquatic Center. And this year, but over the last few years, those funds have been draining with not much putting back into those buckets. So as you can see below, we put quite a few dollars into those funds to try to start rebuilding those again. And also prioritizing and allocating ARPA funds is another important one. And of course, we did create the new vehicle reserve fund, vehicle replacement reserve fund, and a police contract reserve. How that normally works, we have our contract with the sheriff's office, and then we do reconciliation, and oftentimes there's some differeses in those amounts. And this last year we were hit with a pretty big difference of what we thought it was going to be. And so to have a reserve fund in that we can call on if they come back and say, hey, that's 100,000 more than what you budgeted. Well, this is where we can pull it from. And please, if you have any questions as I'm going throughout, let's discuss. So on to the executive department here. You'll see the estimates and salaries and benefits are lower than the estimated actuals in 2021 are lower than the 2022 budget. That's primarily due, and you'll see that in some of these, to positions not being filled, and so the pay wasn't going out. And then you'll recall Darren Moon, who used to work here. We've essentially kind of eliminated that position, and so that's also reflected in this as well. On to personnel. A couple of changes here, normal increase in the salaries and benefits. Other services and charges are increased. You'll see there, that was for the community development director recruitment costs. And I'm kind of going through these a little bit quickly. So if you want me to slow down and talk more about them, we can, or I'll just kind of cruise through these and then we can get to more of the meat of it. So with ARPA in 2021, we are spending some ARPA funds, and that capital outlay of 65,000. That's for the AV, the audiovisual equipment that we'll be installing here in council chambers for our virtual and hybrid meetings that we'll have here. So that's being worked on right now. So decision cards in the executive department, 2 were submitted, and both were recommendations from the Human Services Commission to Julie, and then Julie submitted these decision cards. One was for a full-time FTE community care navigator, and then the other was for a half-time FTE, same position. And I just didn't feel it really prudent right now to hire 2 people for that position when we really have no idea what the position will do, what the need is in the community. It made sense to hire a person, at least for this first year, and this is with the 1590 funds, to come in and establish what that job is and the need. Joe?
Would that community care navigator be similar to the position Auburn has? Auburn has a guy who goes around and works with the homeless and lets them know you can be homeless. You can't be homeless in Auburn.
That would be part of the position. There's victim advocacy. There's a lot of work that position would entail.
Okay.
But that's kind of the thing, is it just didn't make sense to us to hire 2 people right now as we're trying to formulate what that position is and what the need is in the community. So I funded the full-time, not the half-time. And then under personnel, we've been running a 2-person shop there for 14 years, something like that. And obviously the needs have grown. We're a much more developed organization. And so we funded another person position in that department to help out Noreen. So no future significant budget issues. So on to council, court, and legal. So in the council budget here, you'll see some the transfers out in 2021 were much more significant than they are in 2022. And the bulk of that is 440,000 of that transfer out was to the street fund. In 2022, that transfer to the street fund is only 60,000 from the general fund. And that's because there's, what was it, 330 something, 380,000 that is being put into the street fund from the TBD, the car tabs. that was not there last year. So it helps them break even, the TBD being there, but because of the reduced general fund subsidy, it doesn't increase the street fund budget, right? The thought was to keep it even right there and see what council's thoughts are with anything regarding that. So the transfers out for 2022 are 60 to the street fund and then another 10,000 for public art. Any questions on those? Well, actually, let me address, there's another big discrepancy there in other services and charges. You see in the 2021 budget, the 452,000, $293,000 of that is for the 1590 funds that we set aside to transfer for SKIP for construction. SKIP never presented anything in that regard, and so we've just moved those funds to a reserve fund now, and they're not budgeted going forward in 2022. And we didn't see the need to budget until we know where the construction portion of those funds will be allocated. So they're not in there right now. On the municipal court, you'll see the estimated actuals in 2021 are a lot lower than what our normal budget is. We used our court and jail services a lot less last year, but also a significant decrease is SCORE, the jail that we use, only charged us last year based off of our usage, our actual usage, and not our base contract amounts. And so that significantly decreased, but next year in 2022, they're going back to the actual contract amounts. And so that's why we're back up to that 634,000. In legal, not much changes there, just pretty standardized there in legal. So I'll go over to central services.
Regan?
Yeah.
Going back to legal,
Yeah.
because we're needing to hire a new prosecutor. Are they coming under legal or are they going under municipal court?
That's under the courts.
Okay, and are we expecting that to increase, or we think we're going to be able to keep that at?
Hoping to keep it pretty
Okay.
much the same. We were paying her, a pretty competitive market rate. So I wouldn't anticipate that going up too much if it does.
Okay.
We'll kind of see what we get back, but yeah, good question.
Thank you.
Okay, so for central services here, other services and charges increased in 2022 due to, we had an increase of 27,000 in common area expenses and an increase of 34,000 for our recycling program that is reimbursable through grants. But that's what you see the increases there for central services. And the debt service increase in 2022 due to our building lease had a contractual increase coming up next year as well. So decision cards, none in city council, municipal court, or legal. Central services, we do have office painting. Did we figure how long, was it 18 years ago, last painting? Something like that. So we thought it's probably time to get a fresh coat of paint in here. And then also we increased the carpet replacement fund. We discovered what we're putting into that fund is not sufficient to pay for any replacements. And so this is an increase of 1,200 ongoing, 1,250 for that. Yeah.
Do we have any TI improvement dollars from our contract that we can use for that, or is there any?
Like
allowance?
funded tenant improvement? No,
Or
we
an
have,
allowance throughout that can get reimbursed? For,
like if we not want to knock down some walls or something.
or just improving the building in general, like would painting fall into that?
We've got, I'm not sure if I'm answering the right question, but we've got a little pot of money that we keep in the central services department for repairs and maintenance and things like that. But
Okay, I was just thinking when we renegotiated our contract
Oh,
with
gotcha.
with the property owners,
Mhm.
also now have the tenant improvement dollars set aside for.
I don't think so.
No, we don't have that. No. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
another tenant would just paint it a different color, so they're usually not covered.
Yeah. Okay. So finance department, I'll turn it over to Casey.
Which one needs to
Just
go?
push the right.
All right. So for the finance department,
you'll see we've got a little bit of increases in our salaries and wages from 2021 to 2022. And that is because we hired our new senior accountant this year. Super excited about that, to have that restaffed. For the other services and charges, again, just some minor changes due to the state auditor's contract. Their billing rate has increased. And we have one decision card. It's our Springbrook software upgrade. And our current version is no longer being updated or having patches or fixes done to it. So we're to the point now where we need to do an upgrade to it. So this would move us to the most current version, and it will be ARPA eligible. So that will be paid for out of those funds if you guys choose to do that. Really no significant budget issues. The only thing we have is our auditor's fees that we really can't control that seem to be increasing every year. So that is it for me.
You're up, Megan.
So for us, supplies and stuff were up a little bit because everything at Covington Elementary costs a little bit more than we were hoping it would. It seems like a little bit of maintenance was deferred by the school district and with their expectation of leaving the building, and we're kind of playing catch up. I think the overall concept is to do as little as possible and as much as we have to be really careful with money and to not spend anything we don't need to. The building will probably eventually be torn down in about 10 years. But everything that we have to try to keep it comfortable for the officers. The 2022 increase for budgeting is for CEPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. It's something that's really near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I think could really benefit the community and the businesses in the area. I think it's something really important for us to start taking really seriously as the community develops, excuse me. We are hoping to do training with a lot of our officers and hoping to eventually bring in some of the community as well. Everybody kind of working on looking at businesses and homes and ways to prevent things and encourage them to be used in the way that they should be used.
I'm just going to chime in real quick and let you know that those training costs are covered by a one-time legislative appropriation we received this year for law enforcement. We received about $80,000. So,
yeah, and apparently a negative amount in the estimates for capital outlay.
we got a refund.
Due to receiving a refund. So that's good. Moving on to 2022 decision cards, I think the community care navigator is supposed to be, we already talked about that.
Yeah.
And then air conditioning, we realized this summer that the building doesn't have air conditioning. When it took us a couple of days to figure out why the building was so hot and we couldn't get the temperature to go down, it's because the district never installed air conditioning in the building because the children aren't in it in the summer.
Yeah, kids don't.
So we had some very hot and uncomfortable officers this summer. And we have jerry-rigged a home air conditioning unit into the report writing room and made it work for now. But we would love to have at least air conditioning in the building into the two rooms that are occupied primarily by our officers. The $50,000 number was a guess based on the one estimate that we did have come out. The guy gave us that number off the top of his head and then never actually produced a formal estimate for us, even though we've asked for it several times. We are hoping that we can find something that is substantially less expensive than that, but since that's the only kind of number we've been given, we put that number there.
And that's another project that HVAC repairs are eligible.
Could you explain, unless it's coming later, what you envision the community care navigator doing? I feel like the only thing I've really seen is the description in the community card or in the decision card. So I'd like to know what their day looks like and what the benefit is to the community.
Okay, so the community care navigator is a position that was come up with by the Human Services Commission. And Julie actually wrote the job description and stuff, but I was also heavily involved in it. The plan for the community care navigator would be that person being a mental health provider. And
So they're licensed.
a licensed
Okay.
NHP, yes, that would also work with the police department, theoretically, actually in the same building as us. And we would be doing cross referrals. And this would be a person who would be reaching out and helping coordinate care for people that are in need of more than what the average officer is aware of or can offer, or is in need of ongoing care, kind of the people who are getting repeated calls about, the people who are having trouble navigating the system, the people that are in need of, that might go and get help if there was somebody there to help get them into the system and help them understand how to use the system, because our system can be rather cumbersome and hard to find what they need. So, and in Covington, we actually don't have a lot of resources for people that need social services. And King County can be really difficult to get mental health care or social services if they need it. So the hope is that that person with their mental health background, working hand in hand with the police, will help kind of address some of the bigger problems that aren't criminal in nature, but have maybe an addiction or a unhoused or a mental health component to it.
And this is where we would be using our 1590 funds. So I get this sounds wonderful, but we still don't have any services in Covington for mental health or behavioral health issues. So what are some solutions being discussed to address that? Because, I mean, I've been in this situation helping a family member and there's nothing local. And a bus trip to Sound down in Auburn is like an hour and 45 minutes, like
Right.
one way because of the transfer. So I'm curious how we can not necessarily say no to this, but I mean, this is our opportunity to leverage funds to help fix and not just always react. Like what's happening in Covington here for our residents?
So as far as
Besides
mental health
triaging
services
them,
and addiction
right.
services,
A nearby service that they don't have to.
yeah, that's not been on our radar to establish those kind of services here. I don't know how we could do that as a city.
Do we just wait for an organization to say, hey? come
Well,
on? Like,
right,
I want to come
so-
to Covington, like, I really see this as a gaping hole.
Mhm.
Gaping. A council member died by suicide and we still have, I mean, like nothing is progressing. What as council members, what as a city staff can we do in Covington for our residents?
Sean first.
No, I just want to ask, what would
Yes,
that,
please, go
yeah,
ahead, because I'll just keep ranting.
yeah, no, I just
Sorry.
want to ask a clarifying question. What would that look like? And then how is that different than, say, what the county's providing, other than it would be here in Covington?
So I would envision access to services here in town. I
Right.
see Enumclaw has it, Maple Valley
Do
has
they have
it.
a, do the city? I'm not trying to do that.
Sorry, what?
Where is that located? Is the city running that, or is it the MultiCare running that? or-
So I know there's Sound Mental Health, there's Valley Cities, and these organizations have different things. I'm not saying that's just the solution is one of these orgs coming into town, but it seems to me like that would be something we should be doing, is trying to get access here. Versus, because I feel like the chief is going to see the same thing, triage, you're just gonna constantly be triaging because these people still don't have access, right? They're gonna be like, okay, well, you have to like go here and here and here, and it's not within walking distance of their home.
I
Outpatient
think-
care has to be like at their
Yeah.
fingertips.
So for mental health, we have $250,000 a year from these funds to spend. And so I don't know, other than if we contracted with some mental health provider to have someone here a couple times a month, we could do something like that. I don't know. I don't know how valuable that would be, as opposed to the thought with the community care navigator is that at least they're providing, there's a gap there too, right? Because our officers are needed on other things and can't necessarily be handling addiction and mental health type issues, and nor should they be doing that. And so that was the thought. And council asked for recommendations from
Absolutely.
Human
And
Services.
This
and
is a
so
need.
yeah.
I don't
So
disagree with that, but I see that the problem will continue to exist.
Yeah.
So why do these other communities around us have access and we do not?
That's because they've reached out to organizations to come into their community. And
I-
so I continue to have conversations with some of these groups, but I see this community care navigator, the first step to getting those organizations to realize, yes, Covington has a problem, and getting them now to start coming in here. And then if we get that aquatic center, which is a community center, then that community center, which is what Maple Valley has, what Black Diamond has, that's where they have those services at, is those community centers. And that's where Sound, Kent Youth and Family Services, where these other organizations come to those community centers. And I see this, I mean, in my opinion, I see this community care navigator as the first step to getting those organizations here into Covington to start helping, instead of us having to help send people to Auburn and Kent and wherever else we need to send them to.
I honestly, I just don't know that I can make an educated response to that. I think it's a really good idea. I just don't know how with these few funds we're talking about, we bring those services to Covington. And I think the reason they're in other places like Seattle and Renton and
And
Kent.
Maple Valley and Enumclaw, Kent and Auburn.
Yeah, and I don't know how Maple Valley got theirs. That would be a good question, because a lot of times these are market decisions, like here's where the most need is, let's go there. So I think something we could at the very least do is reach out to some of these organizations and find out, why are you in Maple Valley and what would it take to get you here or there?
That's because Mark Purcell from the Maple Valley Community Center worked directly with those organizations to come to his community. center.
And what is being provided in Maple Valley? I'm not aware.
It's just part-time services.
Yeah, they run the food bank and.
I know the
help with
food
some
bank,
senior
but-
citizens, But they're very underfunded.
But it's
and-
not addiction and mental health
No,
services,
no,
right?
No, it's not that. at
So
all.
we already have food bank and what's being provided.
But
in
they
Maple
have
Valley.
mental health. It's what's it called? Nexus. They had a Nexus. They
Yeah,
have a
it's
Nexus.
it's basically Auburn Youth and Family.
Yeah.
Okay,
Joe.
They have a branch in Maple Valley. I've called them and talked to them.
Yep, Joe.
So I know that our work with Vine Maple Place that Human Services gives money to, works with their, helps to find housing or temporary housing for them, for people who are experiencing homelessness at the moment. So that's one thing that I think I can envision this community care navigator working with, is going out there and working with people who are homeless, who may not have an addiction issue, but they're just experiencing homelessness. But Skip is working slowly to get more resources out to the communities that we're working with. So all of the cities that are there, and Skip is reaching out to Maple Valley. They're supposed to present this last week, but their meeting was canceled. So might be adding Maple Valley to the list. But I know Auburn has something similar to this community care navigator. And he's out there, he's in his office maybe 5-10 hours a week, just filling out his paperwork. But he's out there meeting with the people. And that's what I'm hoping that this is what he's doing. He's out, this community care navigators going out there and finding the people who are needing this assistance and seeing what it is they need. And that community care navigator can come back and tell us, this is the stats I'm seeing, this is what we need here. So I think that's what this position would be good for, personally.
Beth, then Sean. Oh, I'm sorry, did I cut you off, Joe?
No, that's all I had at the moment.
Oh, Regan and then Beth.
Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, just to very quick reiterate what Jennifer was saying too. I think it does need to happen sooner than later. And with the Aquatic Center, that's still an unknown, and what it's gonna look like and the timing of that. I don't want to wait 5 years or 4 years to have some resources available. If there's an opportunity to particularly partner with MultiCare, for example, I don't know what it looks like because that's not my industry, but having a few clinicians, professionals that are close, with some building, like a few rooms or something where they can be offering some treatment or getting them at least started down that path where they work with the community care navigator. I mean, to me, that seems like the quickest way to get that kind of a service in, and then even if it's on temporary, but I agree with the need here. Because you see the
Yeah.
same people walking around, and I'm like, I know they ride a bus, but where they're going and how we're gonna get that, give them the help they need, I don't.
So I think council has some options here, even if, we wanted to, let's say we didn't fund the full-time community care, and we just funded a half-time, that would still leave us with around 170, 180,000 that we could put into some of these services, or not fund any of those and do something different. I think there's some options for that. So we can absolutely find out. I'm really curious of what's happening in Maple Valley and how they've contracted to get.
Yeah, I
get- Sean,
So I second a lot of what's being said. I guess I would just make the following proposal. I like the idea of the community cares navigator, and I would suspect or ask that this person in the next year, if we bring them on, their first task would be to immediately figure out what the needs are in the community. Just they gotta go out and do that. ID those barriers, go to where the resources available and where are they, and then identify the barriers to get to those. So maybe some of this funds could be used to pay for Uber trips to go to those. So make it easier for them to get there until we have it here. And then long-term, ID the long-term needs in this community. Who are those services that we can partner with, that can come here? And then they have to have a plan by the end of the year on how to do that. So I would foresee this being a budget item that we would go forward with, and they would come to us and say, this is the funding we need in order to make that happen. So I agree with you. I think we need the services here. How do we get to those coming here? I think by putting this person in the community, kind of like what Joe just said, this is what Covington needs, and this is why we need it, because we're out there and we see it, that we can make a proposal to those places that could actually bring those services here. So that's what I would suggest. Let me see if there's anything else. I just wondered, who would this person directly report to? Would that be in the police department? Would that be,
It would be police chief and me.
okay?
Yeah.
I think we want, and I'm just, we want to think about that, where that person, what the community would see that as, or what the perception would be as being in the police department. So
Right.
anyway.
Christine, and then Jennifer.
So I support this position entirely. Until there is somebody responsible for coming up with solutions, we will continue to have these questions and these problems without seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. The moment, somebody has the responsibility of providing us at least with information, stats, long-term, short-term, whatever it is. Beth and I were talking, there's the acute problems that we have to solve without failing to plan for the long-term future, because it's going to change every year, and we don't know what next year brings, especially with the last year or two. But we have to be prepared. We just don't know what to be prepared for. So I wholeheartedly support this position. MultiCare. Oh, sorry, we're gonna go back to why Maple Place. They don't just provide. It was so cool. I recommend everybody take a tour of just the area, the facilities. They don't just provide a roof over your head. They have somebody who teaches about finances. They have a counselor, and whether we pour resources into that, which can be recommended by MultiCare from a medical clinician standpoint. That's obviously up to somebody else, but let's not discredit what Maple Place can do with a few more resources. They are the pros of, just not mental health, but everything around it. So I just explore options.
Jennifer.
So when council asked for some mental health options to be researched for these funds, I am disappointed that we didn't reach out to those other cities. We have a human services person, like, why don't we know what it takes to get an org in town? I mean, I've made these comments before. So again, I'm not saying this isn't a great idea, but I am seeing I am seeing a lack of response, honestly.
From staff, you mean?
I am.
I think there may be a little bit of confusion there and
Right,
maybe
and please
misunderstanding, because I think if council directed staff to do it, we would have done that. I don't know if council directed staff to discover how to get
No.
those resources in Covington. And if you did, then I take full responsibility for that not happening. But I don't think that directive was ever given by council
No.
to
it was
staff
not.
to do. But I still think it's a great idea and something that we can do. You know, if that's what council wants us to do.
And that's what our Human Services Department is doing through the funding, is reaching out to those organizations to come and help in. Covington.
Well, we did reach out to them to see what the need is, all the agencies that we fund, right, for the ARPA funding. We reached out to discover that need. And Jennifer, I really apologize if that was a directive from council for
Yeah, I
us.
mean, I thought that's what I was gonna get when it was a few months ago. And I thought that we were going to see options and be educated on what some of those options are to provide services to our residents. That's what I took away.
Okay. Well, if we drop the ball on it, that's on me. So I really apologize. We'll have to look back and make sure that we got it.
Yeah, I
get
mean,
it
one
right.
option, this looks great, but it's one option.
Mhm.
And so I feel like, okay, pick this option.
Right.
Okay, let's move on, because we have.
Okay,
at the
thank
end-
you.
At the
Well,
end of the agenda. we
If
have
I can
budget.
ask, I don't want to be in this situation again. Can I get some council direction on how you want us to proceed
I-
with this?
Personally think that by starting with Community Care Navigator, they're the first step, just like our community, like Maple Valley. Their community center directors are the ones that are knowing what the services are. We don't have a community center director. I envision this Community Care Navigator being able to start that and get what is needed in the community, like Sean said, and bringing back what we need to what Jennifer brought up earlier, working directly with Chief Roberts and with Julie Johnston to get us what we need and get those services out here. But that's
So
my
we can
opinion.
do that. I would just say a decision doesn't need to be made today on if we hire this full-time position or not. If the council would like us, we can reach out to some of these services and bring it back at a council meeting on some options. Yeah.
I think that for my part, closing the loop, exactly what Sean said, like, do this, but have a few goals, not just the job description, but like a few achievable goals with a timeline so that we can see and know that that's what we're trying to achieve.
And that was our intention with this position, that's what they discover that's why we didn't hire two people, because we need to know what that need is first, but yeah. Okay.
Not to mention.
Right, so future significant budget issues for the police department. We've already talked a little bit about the ongoing maintenance and repairs for Covington Elementary. We've got one roof problem solved, and we've got a little bit of a couple of other things that we need to take a look at just to make sure that we're not having problems crop up on us. Other than that, the city's obviously continuing to grow. We're having a huge increase in our dispatch calls for service at the moment, but we're gonna be about the same as last year for dispatch calls for service. But as the community grows, the need to add officers may continue. And then we potentially have some overtime costs if we want to maintain a 2-officer minimum. Because we are continuing to need to carry our fair share of vacancies as King County Sheriff's Office is continuing to have significant staffing shortages that will probably be significantly worse by the end of the year due to the vaccine mandate.
How many total
Sean.
officers do we have?
So good.
I was just curious, how many total officers we currently have? there?
17. Well, actually 16 because we got a vacancy. And so we're carrying one vacancy right now. One person in our city is a temporary employee, so he could be pulled out by unincorporated. Our fair share right now is 2.6 because King County actually uses their entire number of FTEs that they have allotted, which includes officers that are in the academy or injured or long-term leave to calculate our fair share.
So what she means is we're supposed to be holding 2.6 FTE vacancies.
Correct.
We haven't had that yet, but so as soon as we lose people, they won't fill those positions.
Correct.
Sean?
So a couple of questions. I want to go back to the set tag. What, can you talk a little bit more about what that is and?
Sure.
I have a couple other questions.
So SEPTED is called crime prevention through environmental design. It is, the concept is that if you design an area in a way that encourages it to be used properly, it will discourage improper use. This building and this campus is actually a really good example of it because I did a walkthrough with Justin Vandersloot about 1.5 years ago and explained all the concepts to him. And this is something that can be applied when a building is being designed and initially, but it is also something that can be done obviously on a little bit lesser of a scale after a building in an area is designed. So like you'll see that he did a bunch of trimming of all of the trees. The standard for SEPTED is that a tree canopy is 6 foot or higher. So it's, and then nothing on the ground is higher than 2 feet off the ground. So what you're doing is you're maintaining a sight line. Another example of SEPTED in this complex in particular is the statues, the human statues that are all over the place, because people are actually subconsciously less comfortable committing crimes of opportunity when they feel like they're being watched. The subconscious doesn't know the difference between a real human or a statue of a human. It's the human form that makes you feel a little bit less
With some
opportunistic.
scarecrows around.
There you go.
Have you ever walked around City Hall
Yeah.
during purple light nights and we have those
Yeah.
silhouettes?
Yeah.
It spooks you sometimes walking down the corner.
It does feel a
I'm
little.
semi joking, but yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of the same idea. And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily to scare people, but to make
Right.
people feel like they're not alone.
Mhm.
And that has not necessarily just negative connotations, but positive
Right, right.
connotations as
Right.
well, because if you don't feel like you're alone, or you feel like there's people around you, you're gonna carry yourself in a more confident manner. And let's see, what's another thing that he did? Oh, the mural out in front of Starbucks. So a graffiti artist considers themselves an artist above all else. They will not tag over somebody else's art. That was being tagged constantly. So Justin had, actually was an employee of Starbucks that is in art school, do a mural there, has not been tagged since. So to me, it's really important to be employing these things. Like the Arts Commission wrapping the utility boxes to me is wonderful because you notice those are not the ones getting tagged. So I think there's so many little things that we can do that aren't necessarily expensive, but just applying a little bit of common sense and thinking through the way that we are designing our community and the way that we can encourage residents and the businesses to maintain and design their properties will really help just encourage our community members to feel comfortable and safe and to make our community less opportunistic.
What we're hoping to do next year is provide a free workshop for property owners and businesses to come in and really learn the value of SEPTED and what it can provide for them. So,
That's great. I had that, you should do a presentation on that. So, okay.
yeah,
So sorry.
we're working on it.
I got a couple others. So that's great. I really appreciate that. So you talk about here that we're gonna have continued detailed residential growth and we need to add 1 officer per 1,000. If the county says we have to hold 2.6, how do we hire? I'm not understanding how we can hire new officers if we're being told to hold 2.6. And then I have one more question after that as well. That's the last one. So explain that to me. If the county saying hold and we want to hire.
That I am still trying to figure that one out
Okay,
myself.
So we can't, yeah, so I'm not,
right.
let's understand.
So at
Right.
this point, it's just a staffing shortage. They just don't have enough people going through the academy
Yeah.
to fill all the positions being needed. So we could say we want to hire someone, we'd pay the 9-month lead time, and then we'd stop paying until 1 year or 2, whenever they can bring in enough people to fill that spot.
So it sounds like we may need to start communicating, well, probably others do it, with the county and say, look, there's a demand or, so, okay. So I'm not a misunderstanding that.
No,
We can't hire any new officers even if we wanted to.
Right.
Okay.
correct.
Last thing then on that, so if I understand correctly. So maybe similar to what Jennifer was saying last time, maybe some options on how we deal with that issue. And
The officer shortage?
Yeah, or just, yeah, how do we increase our police department, our other options to be in a county contract city. So just saying that might be something we need to think about.
Yeah.
going forward. If it really is going to become a problem, well, and if there's no solution to the county, then we have to come up with other options.
Right.
So, thanks. That's it.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead, Chief. Thank you.
Community development.
No, actually, that's a very good conversation with everybody, so thank you.
It is.
And it needed to
I will
happen.
never drop it, I promise you.
Never what? Oh, drop.
And Jennifer, don't drop it.
Okay, so Community Development Department. We have two different basic budgets, two different funds. The first one is the community development. Generally, we call this the general fund part of our department. As you can see, pretty much throughout, the 2021 actual is far less than the budget. And that was basically due to numerous positions, people leaving. And that most of them have still not been filled yet. So we are currently working on that. Hopefully 2022, we're going to see a full department again. For the most part, we've kind of worked at 40% less of our normal staff for quite a bit of the year. So we're hoping 2022, early 2022, we're back up. And so you'll see that the requested budget for that is pretty much reflective of that, with just your normal increases for salaries and benefits. The second fund that we have is a development services fund, which is the part of our department that really does obviously the development of the city. So basically getting in permits and doing that review. You can see that these are also down for the most part, at least for salaries and personnel and supplies. Down some. Again, there are still vacancies here. We anticipate 2022 being fully back up to staff, and again, increases just kind of are the normal increase for salaries and benefits. The other services and charges, that's kind of where the big one is here. And I will talk a little bit about it, and I'm probably gonna hand it off to Casey for the accounting part of this. But part of this is for engineering, our engineering services for the city. We do not have the development review engineer position filled. And we've just seen a big need for these kind of engineering services. And I think we're estimated was about $240,000 more than what was budgeted for 2021. So as you can see in the 2022 requested, we have additional funds for that. It is one of the positions, if not a couple of the positions, we plan on filling. But even once it's filled, we're probably going to still have to use some outside consultants until everybody's up to speed. The second part, I think I'm just going to hand off to Casey, and that's really probably the big number here.
Well, first off, I'll mention that his increase in contract costs for his other services and charges are still being covered by the fees we're taking in. So we're still covering our costs. Secondly, the accounting change that happened, and I've mentioned this in my quarterly reports, not that I expect you to remember, but school mitigation and fire impact fees. We used to collect them in an account, and they went in and they went out, and they weren't a revenue or an expenditure. Now I've got to account for them on both sides. So the big increase in the expenses is just us paying those out to the fire district and the school district, but you'll see a big increase on the revenue side as well. So that's just how it's flowing in and out now.
Can I ask a quick question then? If we do end up getting, if we get that full-time engineering position filled, and then we're still augmenting it with contract services, but that would still lower our costs, because every time you have to contract something out, it's much, much higher than if we had them on.
Correct.
staff, right? Okay.
Once we get permanent staff, it's going to be a less of an expense than using consultants. However, as I mentioned, we're probably going to have a little bit of both in 2022.
Okay.
This current year, we just had to rely on consultants a ton. The issue that you'll see moving forward is the work continues to increase. So we'll bring on the development review engineer, which we've had for years, but we still have more work than we've had in years past. And so there's still going to be some contract amounts there that we need consultants to fill those
Would it make
gaps.
sense to hire 2 people then, if we could get that, to keep the cost low to the residents?
So we're currently looking at that. So basically, as I mentioned, we're down several staff members right now. I think we have 4 unfilled positions out of, I think, 12 full-time positions in the department. What we're really looking at now and what we're doing, especially since Selena came on board, is looking at everybody's roles in the department and looking at what we are good at right now with staff and really what we're deficient. And so we're gonna look at all 4 of these positions and really determine, okay, do we need that position or does that position need to change to cover this part of it? So we've started that process. I would anticipate that we're going to be going out to hire probably within the next month or 2, at least for some of these positions, so.
Thanks.
Jennifer?
So what exactly, no, it doesn't have to be exactly ballpark, is the increased engineering versus the impact fees just flowing out differently? Just because that's a huge, 1.8 million is a giant number.
$240,000 for
The
the
engineering.
engineering.
Okay.
And then the rest is all the accounting changes.
Okay,
It's 1.7 million in school mitigation and
Awesome.
900,000 in fire impact.
Thank you.
Any more questions on this?
Thank you.
Decision cards, we have none, since we're still looking at filling all our vacancies. Maybe in 2023, we'll have a few on here, but and future budget issues, we've already talked about staff vacancies. We've really already talked about the consultant services. But the last thing we probably just want to mention is, even for our revenues, it's a little bit tough because of COVID and the way the world is right now on really determining the development coming in. Talking to developers, they're having problems with getting supplies for building. I've talked to them and, everybody knows like the price of wood, all this is way. And so it's really having an effect on the development of the city and it's basically really the world probably. And there's also a lack of contractors, people for a development group to be able to go in and actually do the work that they need done. So looking at all that, and it's still a little bit of some unknowns for us out there for the development side of community development. So
I guess the 2 biggest things is looking regionally, I-5 southbound was supposed to be completed and open this fall, but because of supply chain issues, they're not, WashDOT saying they're not going to open until if they can open summer of 2022. And then locally, our own project there at Highway 18 and 256, the contractors are not going to be able to start until next spring because they can't get supplies.
Right.
Thank
so
you.
that's all I have. So.
Right. So Public Works. So as far as our comparative budget, salaries and wages, 2022, just some normal increase in regards to that. A little bit lower on this year just because of some of the staff, particularly like Sean and that type of thing, actually, we're talking about parks maintenance here. Sorry, my bad. Too many pieces I was seeing. As far as other services and charges, you can see one of the biggest things in that from 2021 to 2022 is over 100,000. That includes the one-time turf replacement in 2022 for CCP, and we've got the grant for that. So that's one of the biggest things. Another thing in that though too is there's a little bit of it's about $6,000 of that is actually we're replacing the portable toilets there on the phase 1 part. You remember we actually own those portable ones instead of renting those, and so it's always been a challenge for us in maintaining, and where's that line of, it's just been a challenge over the years, the fact that we own them. Going back, you'd think that would be a better decision than doing that, but and once they got destroyed, then the cost of trying to get rid of that and replacing, it's just a lot different than saying someone that technically owns it, you're kind of renting those. Anything that gets broken on it, anything that happens, they basically take care of all that. So we're moving to that piece of replacing those and having that service from the vendor, so to speak, vendor, just have them come in and basically pump that out, and then we're dealing with trying to fix those things. So that's one of the pieces that we're doing in that. Street fund, the salaries and benefits, the increase in that is an additional street maintenance worker. And that is actually, we started moving forward with that, getting that person on board.
Sorry, could you say that again?
No, we can't understand.
Sorry, must be the mask. That's funny. And then the other services and charges, particularly in 2021, the 829 you see in there, that's the increase using those TBD funds that were deferred. We're using those for the street maintenance. Like we did the asphalt project already. We're in the process of getting the sidewalk replacement, those bids, and then also the sidewalk grinding. So that's one of the biggest pieces in that. And then as far as operating transfer out, that's for our roundabout, our RRFB project, which is the roundabout flashing beacon sign project. So and the safe routes to school project in Timberlane. So both of those are grant funded projects. So that's where that's coming from. Swim. So a little bit of that is we had a little bit of change. If you recall, we had Sean Buck, who was our who did GIS for us, and then also did swim. And so Sean left to go to Covington Water, doing a full-time position there. So what we ended up doing is kind of shifting around the fact that we've had increasing in needs in swim and requirements with MPDS. And so that position was funded by swim. And so we're now, basically you'll see in here is a decision card for a GIS person. So you basically took those responsibilities, so it's kind of split. We basically made that into a separate GIS position and then a stormwater position. So the position that's on in the budget is basically a full-time swim position that has MPDS, some new things with like source control and things along those lines that are requirements, new requirements for MPDS. So that's what that is. And then there's a separate position with GIS because we've seen both of those pieces elevated over the years, needing both of those being positions instead of them kind of being split time. Let's see. Capital outlay for 2021. That's basically our 212th project. That's a little bit of finishing design and stuff with that. That's the project that we're also trying to lobby to get funding from the legislature. So that's what that piece was for 2021, is kind of wrapping that up, having that ready. Also, we have Tamarack Pond, which is a kind of a retrofit to, right now, the slopes on the side slopes of the pond. It's a little bit steep, so we have kind of a temporary fence around that, so we're wanting to regrade that. So that's what part of that, those expenditures and stuff. Same projects going into 2022, particularly if we get, grant funding and stuff like that for Tamarack, that would be offset. That's what we're kind of planning for, whether that would be through state or through our ARPA, whatever those options would be. Public Works CIP projects. We have the ongoing 204th project. All those different phases. As it was kind of alluded to, supply chain, I think Regan mentioned this as well. On our 204th project, we have that SR 18256 project awarded, but because of materials deferred till first of the year before they'll get started on that. But basically budgeting for those phases for the rest of 204th and that 256 SR 18 phase. Maintenance facility. We've been doing a lot of our kind of, I guess, due diligence as far as getting environmental and all those type of things taken care of on site. We're actually going to be meeting next month with our consultant. There's got some preliminary.
Just to clarify, this is for the new facility by Matson Middle School there north of the skate park.
Thank you. Yes. So they have got some preliminary site designs or whatever. They're gonna start talking with us on that. So hopefully we can move forward next year and start building something is our hope. So that's the plan for that. Annual traffic safety. Those, I believe, is where the RRFB and the I just said it, the Timberlane drops into under those categories. And then 1063 Covington Way is still in design. 1127 rebidding that soon. Believing we will have much better bids. Definitely fingers crossed on that. And then 1128 is designed for the next phase, 185th to 192nd. And then decision cards. We have a couple of IT pieces. One is the cloud backup, obviously beneficial of the most consistent staying back up is if it's cloud-based. I think that's important more and more these days with how quickly things are security-wise. That helps with that. If you look at, I'll come back to GIS coordinator, but the Rapid 7 is security. That's basically as we become more remote and things along those lines too. It's helping identify unusual activity for staff computers and that type of thing, logging in if they're doing different things, both locally and remote. So it's nice that we would have that. It kind of identifies like, oh, that's not normal activity. So it would just be an additional security measure in that regards. The GIS coordinator, I talked about that a little bit earlier, as far as the need for that with the more and more things that we see that GIS based, we get a lot of requests from that on needs of that in other departments too, of utilizing GIS to create information that can get out to the public and that type of thing. So that was important. Then technology, professional services support. That's also an IT, just getting some tech support and maybe some experience or knowledge that we don't have, that there's just more and more systems that are out there and basically getting our things up and running, or just ongoing support of things. And that's where that was. The brush chipper, obviously we've had to rent those over time, and they're difficult when you need them to get them because everybody wants them at that time. So that was a huge thing for us. You know, they've got plenty of them when there's no storms, but as soon as there is, there's none. So maintenance vehicle replacement, that kind of goes a little bit to the setting up that maintenance replacement fund. These are basically needs where we were underfunding some of the vehicle replacement needs. And so that's what this is doing, is helping with that as well in the replacement of a vehicle. A lot of times we're increasing staff, but we're also not increasing vehicles all the time. So we're having still needs of, like, these guys are trying to shuffle vehicles and stuff in maintenance. So it's kind of a two-pronged thing that helps with that. We're obviously always trying to constantly manage that in the sense of what's the best thing to do as far as utilizing funds to replace vehicles and that type of thing. We've been working with finance and stuff over the years to do that as well. The flashing yellow arrow project is on 256th and 180th. That is, as in talking with the school district over the years, that it just left me just there north of 256th, the middle school.
Crestwood.
Crestwood, thank you. And elementary. So basically what that does is there's some, with the crossing, there's basically been issues with flagging and turning lefts and things along those lines. So this would help with that, working with the school district in that regards to implement that. Bob's been talking with them about that. I think that's a shared cost, I think, with the school district, a 50-50, if I recall right. And then Wingfield bridge load rating, basically there's a requirement mandate for certain sizes of bridges to have a certain loading, basically engineer going out, evaluating that. So that's what that is, has to be done by the end of next year. So then the only other thing is the variable message board that wasn't funded. Although I think we've been still talking about some strategic ways to get that actually funded. So
Yeah, it could have COVID messages.
yes.
Well, that was technically,
That was what we were trying
you could
for.
do it, but then you couldn't then turn around and start using it for all these street projects. But if we supplement our lost revenues and use those to buy the board, anyway.
Yeah,
Beth.
there's a game we can play.
So I have a quick question. I keep thinking about this all the time, especially when I was working in Seattle and pedestrians versus cars. In that flashing yellow project at 256, 180, has anyone ever thought, and maybe is it feasible? Does it make sense to maybe do an all head crossing every few minutes? It's like during those school times when kids are going to and from school. And it was-
Always, like,
Yeah, always,
yeah.
yeah, you know, like they do at Pike Place Market where all kids get to walk for a minute and then the pets have to stay put and then the cars can do their thing. Only because, and I'm not trying to say that's a bad idea, I just, sometimes those flashing beacons like can be really challenging for people to, are they here, are they there, they're going, okay, and then they may not see it in time if it flashes at the wrong time. And I just didn't know if there was a way to, is there another option to change the signaling?
Yeah, and we do look at that. I think that this location is really primarily, if you think about where the walk and where everybody's wanting to go, it is on the west side. There's not much, you think all the development's really on that side, but we do take those into consideration. The things we have to be careful with is, do you have the density for all walk? I mean, a lot of those, you really need, is everybody going in multiple ways, you know, that type of thing. If it is, then yes, that's definitely a benefit. If you don't, then you get a lot of, because demand wise, it's difficult to set it up where like, I only want to cross this way versus if I hit it, it's shut down for everything. And then, okay, is that just for one person crossing,
Yeah.
you know?
I guess I was thinking like, when the kids are there, mean, sometimes kids just, they
Right.
kind of go all
They
over,
wanna
they're
go.
just, they're kids, they're doing their thing.
And what's nice is, at least at this location, they have a person
Yeah,
walk, you know,
And
and
that's what
that
I was
type of thing.
thinking. like,
Yeah, so they have that. This is just a matter of taking away some of that conflict with having the left arrow and a protected arrow type issue. And so that, I think that's been what this will help and improve that. So,
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to figure out the left-hand turn from 180th on 256, that I think is
yes,
where most of the conflict might happen, and how does a flashing beacon help that? Because if you're running parallel to the crosswalk, if you're driving, how is that?
right.
Picturing it, but I'm sure you guys have it sorted out. I'm just,
Yeah, we can talk. I can get you
Yeah.
some more information, or we can talk awfully. It might
Sure.
take a little longer.
no,
to-
that's fine. Yep, yep. Okay, thanks.
Yep. Any other questions on that? So no surprise probably on this. The biggest thing is obviously our sustainability of our street fund. In that regards, ongoing. Really no overlay program really. You know, we've utilized grants in the past. We've talked about the fact that with our assessed value, we've kind of been bumped out of utilizing TIB funds because we basically have too high of an assessed value, so we don't qualify for TBD funds, or not TBD funds, TIB funds in the pavement category. And then fleet replacement funding, and that having that money set aside to help with that is huge. There's, like, we have a dump truck, our second dump truck has no replacement funding in it right now. So those are the types of things that we're starting to try to move in that direction, and appreciate Regan and Casey evaluating that, and obviously staff, council making that determination. So that's all I got. Questions?
Thank you.
Okay. Parks and Recreation, we'll start with the Aquatics Division. Just going through our operating budgets for aquatics. You can see the salaries and wages and personnel benefits have gone up. Really what it's doing is it's going back up to full staffing levels, assuming that we'll get back to full programming in 2022 at the Aquatic Center. Currently, we're just still kind of at a modified level of programming due to COVID-19 and whatnot. Other services and charges. No, supplies is where it is. We have an increase there as well. Every few years, we have to buy new pool vacuums, and also our large inflatable toys, like a large inflatable octopus, get to exchange those out every few years as well. 2022, they happen to both hit in the same year, so that's why that line's a little higher than normal. Oh, and then the difference in other services and charges is less in 2022. That's because this past year we were doing a repair to the hot water supply system, which I'm happy to report is working fine. But we won't have to do that every year, so that's good. Moving on to the Recreation and Cultural Arts Division. Those programs are in a similar situation to the Aquatic Center, in that we've been kind of modifying at a reduced capacity the last year or so. But we expect to go back to our regular levels, so staff costs return to those levels as well. That also impacts their supply lines, a lot of those supply support programs. So as those return to higher levels, that cost goes up. Really nothing else in that slide. And in the Parks Division, no changes to staffing levels. If you look at the services and charges line,
It goes down significantly this past year. We've been working on a feasibility study as well as the pros plan update. Those will largely be wrapped up this year. Pros plan will go into next year a little bit, but that's why there's quite a discrepancy there. CIP projects, the Public Art Fund comes, I guess, is listed as a CIP fund. So right now they're working on doing a rotating art program, which would put 2 more art pieces at the Covington Community Park, and those would rotate out every couple of years. And they're also working on a phase 2 of vinyl art wraps. Both of those projects will probably not be done in 2021, so those will be active in 2022 as well. Jenkins Creek Park. What you see there is the budget for design and development of the property that the city just purchased on the western boundary of Jenkins Creek Park. South Covington Park, that's the commerce grant that the council legislators were successful in getting for design and the first phase of development at SoCo Park, so that will be happening. And then the Covington Aquatic Center, those are the remaining funds that the council and legislators were able to get the city for work on a new aquatic and recreation center. So we've done the feasibility study. There's still funds left to work towards a new aquatic and recreation center, and that's what's listed there. Decision cards. The first one is for a vehicle for the aquatic center. That was actually funded a couple years ago, but then when there was a spending freeze because of COVID-19, we didn't go ahead and purchase it. So since so much time has passed, we're bringing it forward just to kind of get reapproval. It is at a $10,000 level, so that's going to be a used vehicle up there, which should serve them fine. Restore public art funding. When the per capita art funding was initially established, it was $1 per capita, and that was reduced a few years ago when there needed to be budget cuts down to 50 cents per capita. So this would return it to the $1 per capita funding level. The Covington Days Parade was also another item that got cut a couple years ago, and so this would return it to have a parade during Covington Days. And then welcome
Jennifer.
Hey, I just wanted, so relating the 10445 ongoing public art fund. If
Yes,
that's funded, wouldn't the public art budget be higher, or is that just what?
that's the 50 cents difference. So
She's just asking, that's just how much of it we're gonna spend next
Gotcha.
year. The
Yeah,
rest will just be
that's-
banked in there.
That was my question. Thank you.
there you go.
So,
So I remember when we cut the Covington Days Parade budget, that was a fun conversation we had. But then MultiCare came in and said, we'll give you 12 grand for that. Is that, since we haven't had a parade for 2 years, is that why we're going back to funding it? Because MultiCare is like, you guys keep canceling on us.
Yeah, we used to.
We did use
it.
it, well, yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah. I don't
wasn't
think
an
It
annual.
was reallocated. Yeah.
Okay.
Wouldn't that be
Can we just
nice,
get them to do it
Joe?
annually?
What the heck?
It's a discussion we can continue to have with Mark.
And then Welcome Park was actually another decision card that was funded a couple years ago. And it was approved. It hasn't, the acquisition hasn't happened, and this is for the property sometimes known as Covington Pit on the eastern side of the city. We also were going after grant funds to help us acquire that, and we were successful in getting those grant funds. So we thought it was important to bring it back to you. This would actually be using general fund dollars to purchase that property,
Park Reserve though. Part of our Park Reserve. funds.
part of our park reserve funds. And there's also potential to not even use our park reserve if we're successful in getting some other grant funding that would free up some of our dedicated park impact fee funding, then we could use even those for this. But right now, if everything is as it sits, we would have to use our park reserve funding for this.
So this would just cover property purchase.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll say that property
you know, when we were having, right now it's currently owned by the Sioux Creek Water and Sewer District. And when we've talked with them, their initial estimate of the value was $450,000 for the property. But they were willing to be sellers at a lower price if it was going to come to the city. So it's a bargain deal, bargain price. And then also King County also is likely to be able to purchase a trail easement over a section of it, which is a benefit to the city if the Sioux Creek Trail extension comes through that property. But that would be, I mean, it's not going to cover a huge amount of that amount, but there would be a little bit of revenue coming in to offset some of that $354,000.
Yeah, I think they bought for quite a bit more than that, if I recall.
We put a lot of money into.
And then-
Yeah, once it didn't work out, it was a big
Yeah.
loss
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, they put a lot of money into that property for sure, because they had to mitigate some of the issues on it. So that's the decision cards. Significant budget issues, the first bullet, capital improvements, I think we have on there every year. Basically, you know, as we invest into new parks and facilities or even try to maintain the existing ones, those are just big dollar figures. And then the second bullet, or maybe I should say fourth bullet, sustaining levels of service as the city grows. One thing we've noticed with our part-time employees is we're just not able to hire or retain them. We went down to much lower levels during COVID-19, and trying to get those part-time positions back, especially at the Aquatic Center, is really difficult. I think we have 18 part-time people at the Aquatic Center. We were up at 75 at one point. So you can see the difference. And so right now, programs are largely limited based on what our staff availability is, not based on pool space or anything else. So, yeah.
Ethan, so does that number also include park maintenance? Or is that just the services and the programming part, the part-time employee hiring?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it's probably the same issue for our seasonal staff
Oh, I
at
guess,
park
yeah, I
maintenance.
guess it's.
But yeah, anybody that's not a full-time position, because you might fill them, but they might in 2 weeks go find a full-time job somewhere. So retaining them is very challenging as well.
Is that something we're looking at, our strategy for maybe making people more full-time so they're?
We are, we're working with finance and HR right now and looking on hiring and retaining incentives. But
Which are
in the
eligible. Sorry.
which are, but
Are they?
there's probably more rules as a public entity that apply to us than if you were, you know, in the private sector. You have a little bit more flexibility on some of those programs. So it's a challenge, but we're looking at it. Yep. And that wraps up. Right. So who's this going next?
Me. I can catch it.
I don't know if I can throw it. The underhand.
The good underhand.
Yeah.
I thought you'd frisbee it because I know you're a frisbee guy. So Jeff, we're going to talk about street fund and ARPA right now, and then we can get into the forecasting. I don't know if you want to do a break. If anybody needs a
Council,
break
do you want
right
to take a
now,
quick
or
break before we get into ARPA?
unless we're ready to go.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break.
Okay.
Thank you.
Where's the line item for ARPA eligible stamp?
I'll just kind of say.
Yeah.
Welcome back. Welcome back to our budget retreat, and we're turning it over to Regan and Casey to start talking about next steps.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, do you need it? Is that part of the slide? This one? Oh, there we go. All right, there we go. Okay, so a couple things that we'll need the council to deliberate on today. Obviously, the street fund subsidy, we talked a little bit ago about how we reduced that amount for 2022 because the TBD revenue would be coming in. So it kept the street fund neutral as far as the amount of funds being put into the streets, but just from different sources. And so that's a conversation we can have today about, does the council want to continue to subsidize at a higher level or not? And if we do, what that might look like. Are you trying to find that page, Beth? It's page 44 or slide 44.
We added it after they.
Oh, is it not a new thing?
Sorry,
Nope.
we don't have it.
Sorry, so these are just little heads up then.
Thanks.
But we'll get to that when Casey puts the forecast up. We can adjust these numbers and see what it does to the forecast and whatnot. Just something to be aware of. So for ARPA funding, again, we discussed this at council meeting the other night. 5.9 million is what the city is entitled to. That's going to come in 2 tranches. One we received in June of this year. We'll receive the other one in June of next year. We're supposed to, we're not banking on it. If we get it, great. If not, we're not planning on it, so it won't hurt us. The funds may be used to cover costs incurred from March 3rd of this current year and have to be obligated by December 2024 and spent by December 2026. Real quickly, we showed you this at council meeting, just kind of the eligible expenses. I think we're all good on those. And then kind of the guiding principles, how these are temporary funds, so we wouldn't want to invest in something that has ongoing costs necessarily. So here, the important stuff, the needs assessment that we reviewed at council meeting from our Human Services Commission and the providers that we fund. They've identified $515,000 in need in their organizations that could benefit Covington residents. There are a couple of those agencies that we don't think what they would spend the money on will be ARPA eligible. So I don't know that it will be that entire 500,000. It'll be a little bit less than that. From the utility districts, they said they've got $312,000 in past due accounts. That's an interesting one because, we went out to them when we had the CARES funds and we said, we've got all this money for you. And they submitted like a couple $1,000. It just wasn't much. The people they said that were going to use it didn't use it. So I think we put in like 50,000 or something like that. We'll get to that when we get to Casey's slides of 25,000 to each utility district and see how that goes for them. And so then some internal proposals, revenue losses, we've calculated just almost $1.9 million. Small business grants, we could do another round of 150,000 to our businesses for eligible expenses. IT, there's a lot there, 289,000 that we could spend on, and then obviously 2.5 million with swim infrastructure projects. Some of those we've talked about, some we're going to the state to see if they'll fund, as we've talked about at Pipe Lake, but that's the total cost there. So total identified is 5.7. So kind of some recommendations we've looked at are the revenue losses. If we supplement our revenue losses with ARPA funds, we can then use that money to maybe get the street board that Don requested that we didn't fund and some other things that Casey's got all kinds of notes here. I could use ARPA for that. So, for things like that, small business grants, human services funding, put at 450,000 just because there's several requests that would not be ARPA eligible. Utility districts at 25,000 each, and then swim infrastructure we put at 420,000 because those are projects that are ready to start working and get done during this funding period. So
Can you go back
yeah,
just
yeah.
one slide? So just on the revenue losses, what I'll mention is that's the broadest category. That's the one that I can use for basically the provision of any governmental service. So it would be wonderful if I could take that right off the top because they've got more flexibility than those other categories. I can basically use it for anything. I can be super, I can be super creative. I'm really enthusiastic about this pot of money.
We have noticed.
I'll try to stamp it down a little bit, but I'm really, really excited about this.
I sent them
Yeah.
a picture of President
Oh,
Biden. having
yeah,
the
yeah,
ARPA envelope.
yeah, really excited.
Jennifer?
So the small business grants, how did you come up with that number? I know small businesses appeared, at least the ones I was talking to, and based on your feedback from last time, we're really excited about this program when we did it earlier. And I was curious if you're able to gauge the need, like what did you use to come up with this number? Is it
It's really
high
what we-
enough, honestly? I mean,
So it's what we did last time. We didn't have a lot that we did not fund, so there wasn't as many applications as I think we thought that we'd receive. So it's really just kind of that ballpark. This is what we did last time. Let's do that again. It can be totally adjusted. There might be a lot more need. We could, remember they were small grants,
yes,
right?
which is why I was questioning, is that high enough?
Right, so if the council wanted to do bigger type grants, depending on if the losses they have that they'd use for this are ARPA eligible, then we could put more into this and do larger grants.
And then I could just take it out of revenue losses.
Right.
If the applications come in and it's $300,000 worth, I would just I could fund it out of the revenue losses
Right.
section as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
okay.
If council authorizes to do that, we can make that adjustment as the applications come in.
Yeah, I just, I'm still worried, and some of the ones I'm talking to are still struggling, and I'm just wondering how we know what is a good amount.
Yeah, that was just what was funded last time. So I just used that kind of like a starting point.
Okay,
But we can always adjust it. Same with the human services. If we open up another funding cycle, basically, if the Human Services Commissions can kind of handle that capacity. If it comes in more, it comes in less, then we can readjust those.
Well, and that's something we wanted to talk to council about too, because if council gives this funding right here to the Human Services Commission, that's adding a lot more work onto their already workload of what they do. So we need to talk to them to see if that's something they can do. We can do it internally, but if council wants the commission doing it, that's doubling their programming that they typically do. So we need to make sure to reach out and confirm that with them. Beth, I think.
Yeah, Beth and Jared.
No, I think you were.
Oh, was me? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thanks.
So with the small business grants, when you kind of mentioned something, they have to it has to be eligible expense for them for us to be able to give it to them, right? So it's more like operating expense or PPE. type
Yeah,
scenario
and
or
it's
lost
generally on a
revenue.
reimbursement basis, so like,
Reimbursement, okay.
they could use it for getting their staffing levels back up, they could use it for replacing some HVAC, so they've got better circulation, creating more social distance within the restaurants. There's quite a few things they can use it on.
And would it work for businesses that were trying to open and get reimbursed for permitting?
I don't think it would cover.
Probably
for
not.
me.
So they would have to have been in business as of March 3rd.
Jared?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, is it gonna follow the same criteria or guidelines as before?
Pretty close.
Yeah, generally
Because we had what, a third party?
We'll bring it in.
We wouldn't do it this time. We do it in-house.
Okay.
We've actually, our senior accountant that we hired has some experience with that.
Yeah.
And again, she's super excited about the ARPA money. So,
Well, and honestly, with that, there was Evergreen Financial, I think is who we used. We still had to do quite a bit of work, and it wasn't worth the amount that was paid to them on as part of those grant funds. So we can cover it now.
You'd brought up about the human services and stuff. Personally, since staff went out and reached out to the organizations about what they needed, I'm perfectly fine with staff doing that instead of putting the extra double workload on the Human Services Commission. I mean, that's my opinion to move forward, but
If you don't mind, we'd love to kind of hear from the commission on their thoughts. They helped us do this, but just kind of hear, it may be something they want to be involved in. Just don't know yet.
that's fine. Any other questions?
Okay, so I think we'll get into forecasting now.
And just give me a few minutes here to get set up. Oh, Krista, can I have the keyboard? please? Class.
You
Fog
see it?
up.
Oh,
Sorry.
that's okay.
I'm gonna be a rule breaker for just a minute. Goodness. Okay, Krista, then I need to reshare this, right? Because we've got folks. Okay.
Can you see it okay? Would it help if we turn the front lights off at all, or for those in back, are you good?
Bigger.
What?
I think to be.
Can you make it
Can
bigger?
we size it? Yeah, we'll zoom in a little bit.
Struggling.
Just need a little bigger.
There you go.
Does that work? Okay. I'll just make it smaller for right now. Okay, so we're starting off with the general fund. Just a refresher, I don't think anybody's new, but just in case, we start with our beginning fund balances, and these are our audited fund balances that come after we finish our financial statements. So these are to the nearest thousands. We don't only have $11,000 in there. We go through our sales tax, property tax, utility taxes, kind of forecast those out since those are our major revenue sources. These, like property taxes, these come straight from the county. You will notice that like the 2022 is a little bit lower than the revenue during the revenue hearing that I gave you. I tend to ratchet those down about $30,000 for uncollectibles. So this is like truly the cash I'm hoping to get in hand. And then just layout wise, these just accelerate based on average growth that we've anticipated, kind of use like a 5-year rolling average for all of our revenues as well as our expenses. So sales tax, property tax, utility taxes, we have some local criminal justice funds we receive. Those are some state shared revenues, licenses and permits, intergovernmental revenues. These are all of our state shared revenues that come in, like think liquor board profits, liquor board excise taxes, those type of things. Tiny little bit for charges for services, fines and forfeitures. These are our court revenues that come in and then are offsetted on the expenditure side as well. We've got our aquatics fees, and you will see that we've ratcheted them up just a little bit for 2022 for next year, but they're still down below 2019 levels. We're still keeping them down just a little bit until we get our staffing increased and restrictions released and things like that. And that's the same thing for the athletics and recreation fees. They're down just a little bit, hoping by 2023 to be back up to 2019 levels. Miscellaneous, there's just some things in here, technology surcharge, interest, things like that. Our interfund payments, these are just as a reminder, the street fund, development services fund, and the swim fund pay a portion of the legal budget, personnel budget, finance budget, and city manager budget. These you may see a change on next year during our 2020 audit. They want us to update and redo our cost allocation plan. We don't really know exactly what that's going to look like yet. But for next year, I'm hoping that these revenues stay just how they are and I can implement that in 2023. All right, I just had a little bit of a transfer in that came from a project that closed out on the CIP fund side. Generally, general fund doesn't receive money from other funds, but we got a little bit there. On the expenditure side, just our salaries and wages, and I will mention that for our 2022 budget, this does include the COLA. COLA came in this year, June to June, 6.2%. One of the higher COLAs that we've had. It is included in there. And again, there's a decision card like our policy normally does, where we're allowing you guys to remove the COLA if you so choose. Supplies, just minor increases in supplies, other services and charges. This includes an increase for our police budget. That's generally the biggest area that we see an increase in for other services and charges. Again, debt service, this is where Regan mentioned earlier, we're just seeing a little bit of an increase for our contractual obligation for our lease on our building. And then this negative number, this is another little different one. This is our central services department. The street fund, swim fund, and development services fund, again, pay towards the building lease, bottled water, insurance, the things that don't belong in any certain little department. And that expenditure is actually, it's just a negative expenditure, basically, is the way how they show it. It's not shown as a revenue like the interfund services payments are above. This is just an accounting thing from the SAO where they make us offset the expenditure that way. So those are coming from those other departments. Debt service transfer, we've been really fortunate in the last couple of years where our REIT has just been fantastic. We have a lot of money in there currently, enough that we can fund our Public Works Trust Fund loan and our bond payments 100% out of REIT funds, and I'm not having to pay anything out of the general fund currently. And so we don't anticipate anything this year, anything next year. And then back in 2023, I've kind of ratcheted down my expectations a little bit just to be more conservative. But you will see where it drops off here in 2025, and that's because our Public Works Trust Fund loan is done. It's paid off in 2024. And then you can't really see it yet, but you'll see it in 2028. Our bonds will be completely paid off. So then the REIT can be freed up to be used for other CIP projects, or I believe there's some flexibility for maintenance now. So operating transfers out. This is the other one Regan mentioned earlier. This is the transfer that's currently going to the street fund and a little portion to the public art to support the public art and the CIP project, or CIP fund, excuse me. And then for 2022, this is $60,000 going to the street fund, and then the $10,445 going to the CIP art fund, and then just still moving forward with those. So for 2022, we have the decision cards that we funded, and we always break it out between one time and ongoing, so we can kind of roll those into the forecast ongoing and see how they're going to affect us. And then we've got our ending fund balances. So this is what we are hoping to end 2022, $12.5 million. But that's made up of several of our reserves. So these are some of the reserves that Regan was talking about earlier. We currently have $3.1 million in our town center reserve, 1.7 in aquatics, 571 in our parks reserve. I will mention that this also paid for the Welcome Park decision card that we talked about earlier. And then we are anticipating needing these funds for our Jenkins Creek project, unless we see some things move around with mitigation. And then we have our debt service reserve, and we generally keep 1 year's worth of debt service on the books as a reserve. But you will notice as I'm starting to draw it down because we're getting to the point where our debt's going to be paid off. So we're hoping by the end of 2027, then we will have drawn all that down and used it up. And then this is a police contract reserve, again, that Regan mentioned earlier. It's not only for our reconciliation, but it's also for their in contract negotiations currently. And we really don't know how that retro pay will hit us. So we're making sure we've got something on the books to pay that if it comes in. Again, the vehicle reserve. And then this is the HB 1590 sales tax that we're continuing to reserve until we decide how to allocate that. And this includes both portions, the construction portion, the 60%, and then the 40% that can be used for the mental health and behavioral services. So at the end of the day, we really have about 4.5 million that's unassigned.
And it's 60% of it is construction, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
60% construction, 40% everything else,
Mental health.
mental health. So by policy, we like to maintain about a 20% fund balance. So that would be $2.9 million. And we are 1.5 million over that currently. And so moving forward, You can see our balances are dropping slightly. By 2027, we show we have burned through our unassigned fund balance. Again, I would mention this is fairly conservative forecast. I'm not for sure concerned about the 24,000 that I'm in the hole there. But again, it does definitely show that our revenues our expenditures are starting to exceed our revenues by the end of the forecast there. Any questions on the general fund?
And just right quick, I know Regan mentioned that we're trying to build up ideally our fund, our reserve fund to go from a AA to a AAA bond rating. Is that, did I hear that at some point? And is this part of that plan too, or?
Those weren't necessarily in conjunction with each other. As far as our financial stability, we're at a AA+ bond rating right now. It's really good. There were some factors that didn't get us to a AAA bond rating that are really kind of regional factors that were out of our control. So yeah, however that conversation went, the reserve funds were not in relation
Got it.
to the bond rating.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
We're still talking about the general fund?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, for the bonds, because you mentioned that 6.2 cost of living increase, so help me, one, where did that number come from, and then two, do we have to give the entire 6.2, or can we?
So the number comes from, it's the Consumer Price Index,
Okay.
and we get it from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And our current compensation policy is to use that CPI from June to June for our area, and to fund 100%, but also give the council an option to remove it via decision
So
card.
it's either all or nothing.
That's a policy that council put in place well before I was here, but you can change that.
So
Right,
we have to change policy in order to then decide if we want to do less than that 6.2.
Right.
So it's either all or nothing right now.
Yeah, and I don't know what type of policy that was before I got here, but I don't know if it's like, I don't know if it was resolution or just kind of, this is how we want the budget done. So
Is it in our handbook? Because
it might be in there.
Can you go back to that line? I just wanted to see how much that would be.
Sorry.
Should be under salaries and wages.
So-
And really how it was explained to me by Rob when I first got here, the policy was put into place so that it followed CPI. So if CPI is 0, there is no adjustments, right? So it's not arbitrary for us to choose. But I know some other cities we've talked to, they are doing the full amount. Some have policies in place where they only do a 75% of CPI.
Most of them are 90.
A lot are 90%.
We do.
Last year, we asked to have that removed from the budget, so there wasn't a COLA, but sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, and the way our policy works also is if there's a negative CPI one year, we do take that against the next year's COLA and reduce it by that dollar amount. So we are taking the negative.
So if there was a -2 CPI and the next year it was a +4, we'd only
Give them
submit a 2.
two.
But you're not combining then if it's vice versa. So if you didn't get one last year,
No.
you're not,
No,
it's gone forever.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
So the 3.2 million, that's overall for salaries?
That's overall. I will say that there's several vacant positions, so that's not a real, I mean, the COLA is not increasing it by, yeah.
Yeah, but what is the COLA?
Let me get to it for you. So the COLA is a total cost of $435,000 across all funds.
Yeah.
For the general fund, it is $264,000
Yeah.
of an increase.
And that's
want
just-
to tell them what page that's on? It's in your,
It's on your decision card summary on page 151.
Yeah.
And the COLA is basically a cost of living increase from year to year. Because of COVID, costs have been going up, and that's why the CPI has gone up, and that's just to help adjust. And that 6.2 is all throughout the West Coast, because the CPI is based on West Coast area.
For us, it's
this is the
It's
Seattle
Seattle.
Tacoma.
Seattle,
Tacoma.
Bremerton, Tacoma. Okay, so that's for the Pacific Northwest area.
yeah.
And is that?
It was
impacted
high.
By housing prices as well?
It is, yeah, that's part of it, yeah. There's several different consumer goods that they look at to determine CPI, and that's one of them.
For us, it's
You're
Seattle,
online.
Tacoma, Bellevue. It's like-
My other question is going to the unassigned fund balance that's sitting in cash reserves, making like what, 0.001%?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so it's in a safe fund
yes, yes, it is.
that we can use.
I mean, I was really fortunate. I was able to buy some investments at like 1.5. But that was a lot of money at the point at that time with the interest rate.
Any other questions for Casey on the general fund?
Okay,
Thanks, Casey.
so I'm gonna skip the street fund for a second, just because that's gonna take some more discussion, but I'm gonna go to the development services fund. So for development services, this is really what we consider kind of a working capital fund, where the money that's gonna come in one year may not be used for a couple of years because of how their permit cycles work. They collect their plan review fees and may not work on it until the next year, that type of thing. So they have a very healthy fund balance in here right now. They have 5.8 million to start 2021. Licenses and permits, they did see a little bit of a decrease between this year and next year, but that was just really being conservative. When I spoke with Kelly, she just said that this is what they know for sure is in the pipeline currently. So anything that comes in is above and beyond will be a bonus.
And 2021 was a big year with that too, and so we didn't want to anticipate it being at that level and, falsely budget too high.
More than likely, it's going to come in higher than that. This is just being conservative. Again, the charges for goods and services is decreasing. This is also because she's lowered her expectations for the school mitigation fees, the fire impact fees, things like that. Miscellaneous revenues, this is just some interest, not a lot in there. Salaries and wages, again, this is assuming that they are restaffed, just a minor increase for the COLA and steps and general things like that. Other services and charges, again, that is directly related to the revenue that comes in here for the school mitigation and the fire impact fees that get paid out. So you see this number drop, you're going to see this number drop as well. And again, they had no decision cards. So they are showing that they are spending into their fund balance a little bit for next year. And again, that's because, how I mentioned, all those projects and all those revenues that came in 2021, that work's going to be done in 2022. So it's drawing down and paying for those services. For development services, by policy, we have a 15% fund balance target, and they are more than meeting that. So we are good there. Any questions on development services?
Was the engineering position that? I'm hoping to-
They are in here.
It didn't seem like salary went up.
Development services, well, we're anticipating,
Oh, no, if you go
where
down,
am I?
it
Right
only went
here.
up by like 4,000,
I went up by 100,000
886.
to 990.
Oh, 99. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, I can see 900.
Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
That's all I can
Okay.
see. Yeah.
No.
It's also spread apart across two funds, development services and community development. So
Okay.
The engineer himself is mostly development services, but he does have a swim component as well. But there's other positions in there. Any other questions on development services? Okay, swim fund.
Can you zoom in a little bit more?
Oh, yeah,
Just to make
sorry.
it a little easier.
Is that better?
We're mixing nines and eights, so. Yeah, we see it great, so.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I was nervous with my glasses that I was gonna be able to see.
Zeros and nines.
You're gonna have a really big screen on the wall.
Nice. So for surface water management, I treat them a little bit differently than I do the other funds because they are considered an enterprise fund, which means that all of their capital assets, all their pipe they have in the ground, catch basins, everything else is considered an asset and is included in fund balance. So if I showed you the fund balance, it would show they had $8 million here. Well, they don't really have that much cash. They only really have 1.7 million to play with. So I kind of base them off a cash balance. It's easier for me to work with. So for revenues, this is their surface water utility fee that's charged on your property tax payments and paid through the county. We're currently operating under a drainage utility study that we did several years ago. So we have some increases that are still built in here. 2023 is our last increase that's in that drainage utility study. And I'm guessing we'll be looking at that in the next couple of years to see what that looks like moving forward. So you'll see that it jumps up from 2022 to 2023, but then it kind of levels off. I'm only growing it at like 1%, super conservative moving forward. Charges for goods and services. This is just the city of Maple Valley. Are we still doing a contract with them for street sweeping? Okay, so this is just the money that we receive from the city of Maple Valley that helps offset our street sweeping contract. They piggyback with us. And is that correct?
One contract for both cities.
Yeah.
We pay for it all, they
Reimburse us. And again, the miscellaneous is my whopping $2,000 in interest I'm receiving. So for expenditures, again, we've mentioned before salaries and wages. This is any of the adjustments that we're currently making to staffing and swim, as well as the COLA and any kind of step increases for salaries and benefits. Supplies, just really minor increase there. Other services and charges. This is the jump there is just the capital outlay for the Tamarack project. And what was the other project? 212. That's where the capital outlay is there. And then our debt service interest, this is just where we report our copy machines and things like that. No transfers out going forward. And the decision cards, again, we break them out between the ongoing and the one-time. And their ending cash balance, we're hoping to end 2022 at 2.5 million. They have a 20% fund balance target by policy, and we are more than exceeding that. Any questions on swim? Okay, streets. All right, let me get past all that red. Let me just go back here.
And you're gonna go a long ways. then.
Yes.
So swim, I know that there were a lot of swim projects on our ARPA fund list, like a lot, which is fine if that's something we can use it for. And is that included in?
Nope.
Not that, so.
That will be, we'll have a separate kind of discussion on that, and then I can bring that back on the changes worksheet when I bring that back to you for adoption in December.
Just because we don't know which ones the council will want to fund with
Sure.
ARPA,
No,
so
that's
they're
fair.
not included
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, I was just kind of wondering, not that, I mean, it's great that that fund keeps going up, but then I'm wondering like, is that gonna need to keep going up or should something else get?
That will be
Yeah.
one thing that they'll address during the swim
Okay.
rate study, that
Yeah.
it's either they'll start ramping up their capital projects, potential staffing increases, or they'll lower the rate. You know, it could go from the 9% increase to a 5 or something like that.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, I can't see it. Okay, the street fund. So the street fund has always been a little bit of a problem child. Doesn't have a, I'm sorry. Not you specifically.
And by street fund, we mean Dawn.
It's not Don's fault, he inherited it.
There's a little bit of history here, but there was an initiative that happened several years ago that really took a lot of funding away from the street fund. So we've been struggling for years trying to figure out how to fund this. And we took a great step when we did the TBD vehicle license fee. That's the $20 fee per vehicle. It gets us around $380,000 a year. So that's a good chunk of change. And this is the one that we're also talking about. We'll bring back to you during the summit to do the TBD sales tax ballot measure potentially. So for the street fund, started out the year at about 700,000. They've got some licenses and permits. This is just the Comcast franchise fees that come in that allow Comcast to operate in our right of way. It stays pretty flat. It stays pretty much the same every year. The fuel tax, this is a state distribution that we receive for our portion of the fuel tax. Not a lot of growth there. This is comes in per capita. So as our per capita goes up, this will go up. And again, here's the TBD vehicle license fees. Relatively flat. I get a download from DOL once a year. They kind of tell me how many vehicles are added each year, but it's not a big increase. Miscellaneous, this is just the interest that comes in. So you'll see here, this is where Regan was talking about our operating transfers in. For 2021, we budgeted a $440,000 transfer in. Moving forward, this is just the $60,000. And how he came up with that is we were giving them $440,000 before 2021. That money was being reserved because it was tied up in litigation. State Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional. We were able to spend those funds again. We let
The
those.
proposition eliminating
Correct.
these was unconstitutional.
Correct. And so those revenues flowed back into the street fund again. We unrestricted them, let them be spent. And so those $2 amounts right there equal kind of the 440 was kind of how he was coming up with that. Everybody follow that? Okay. Again, salaries and wages, you'll just see the increase here. You can't really see that there was an increase because you're not seeing the 2020 numbers, but there was the street maintenance worker that was added. We're hoping to get him on board or soon if he's not already on board.
Yeah, next, I think the 8th.
Yeah.
I think is what we're shooting
Yep.
for.
So those numbers are in for 2022 as well as the COLA, super minor increase in supplies. The reason why you're seeing a decrease from other services and charges for 2021 versus 2022 is because of those deferred maintenance projects that Don brought to you guys a few meetings ago. So that he's getting those done this year. Those are being done with the TBD revenues that we had in our back pocket, and we're waiting to find out how the state Supreme Court was going to rule on that and then let those flow back in. I will mention, just so I can say ARPA again, is I could put those deferred revenue dollars back into the street fund and use the ARPA dollars instead to pay for deferred maintenance. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. And again, just a real minor capital outlay there. Operating transfer out for next year is going to a CIP project, and I don't know off the top of my head which one it is.
It's still that Tamarack.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, this is for street.
There was one that had a funding shortfall, and so we were using some of the TBD dollars to pay for that CIP project. And then we have our decision cards. We have our ongoing and our one-time. And our unassigned fund balance. This fund requires a 10% fund balance. It's a little bit lower because generally the general fund is helping to subsidize it, and we want to subsidize it as little as possible. So we keep it at a 10%. So they are currently meeting their 10%. They are over that threshold by about $132,000 for next year. So for this year and next year, the street fund's looking solid. It quickly goes south after that. It goes down into it's going low here. So 2023 through 2027, you can see the margin below our 10% threshold. These are the dollars. This is where I need to have some discussion about what our policy is moving forward. The general fund continuing to subsidize and bringing the fund balance back up to that policy level. And we are, like I said, are also going to bring back that ballot measure. What does that look like moving forward? Do you have anything you wanted to chime in or?
No, that's just it, right? We've been having this conversation for a little while now. And now that we're back to our TBD funds, how does the council want to handle that general fund subsidy? Obviously, we can keep going forward at the same level that we're going forward at, but if we want to do anything above and beyond that, then we're going to have to find a way to generate more revenue for our street fund. One option that we could have is with ARPA, surprised you haven't mentioned.
I was like,
Is that we could allocate some of the excess ARPA funds we have into the street fund as the subsidy for at least the next several years, which would eliminate the need for a general fund subsidy for, like I said, at least a couple of years. So that's one option,
I
short
can-
term.
Yeah, I can pay for infrastructure maintenance. That's one of the things I can do with my revenue losses category. And even after we take all of the dollars that are currently being allocated to like IT, maybe some administration, things like that. I have a spreadsheet that I'll pull up and I'll show you. I still have about $1.5 million unallocated out of those revenue losses categories. So I could earmark some of that for maintenance in the street fund and move those dollars in 2022, 2023, and 2024, just kind of reserve them and move them in each year. I could do that. That would help offset this. It's still something, it's just kicking the can down the road a little bit. It's definitely still something we're gonna have to address 2025. But maybe there's some time in there where we're successful with the ballot measure.
And I think we have it on the summit to discuss, the council has to bring it back to discuss ballot measures there.
Yeah,
So-
like I said, they are solid through 2022. But there definitely needs to be some discussion on how to fund them in the future.
Are you asking? Yeah.
Sure.
I mean, if I had my druthers, I would say at least fund it through 2023 or 2024 with ARPA, just to buy some time. And who knows what the ballot measure situation might, how that, if it goes to the public and if it gets approved. And we know that's probably gonna typically generate an additional 600. Up on top of the TDD, being about 900 from a,
For every 1%, I
for
get like
like something, 900,000 versus the 380 or whatnot,
Right.
so.
Yeah, the two, what Casey and I at least thought were the two top priorities that we could use the lost revenue ARPA funds on were for police, but the problem is we can start paying for police, but we're not going to get a
Yeah.
body.
Mhm.
And so then the other one was to subsidize the street fund.
I feel like that's what I hear from a lot of people is that like we have some road repair, in a perfect scenario would be some safety sidewalks and things like this and that and the other, but it sounds like that's a big concern for residents to ensure some
Yeah.
things get fixed and
Well,
not that there's anything wrong with swim and some of those stormwater ponds and things like that have to happen too, but figuring that out.
at least I did throw them a bone. I've got one project funded.
And I think we'll be successful at the
I
state
know.
level too, so.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
then that would be two projects, and then they currently have one budgeted in their base budget. So I was kind of mentioning to Ben, I was like, is that enough for you for next year? He's like, oh, I'm good. Like 3 projects. I
Yeah, it would be a lot,
I
yeah.
mean, technically, he could drag
Yeah.
it out and not finish those until
Right.
2024, whatever. And then this is really only talking about that first pot of ARPA money that we have in our hands, where we've been allocated 5.9 million, but we only have in our hands 2.9 million. And we really are not banking on getting that next 2.9 million. There's a lot of talk in finance director circles about that money being taken back to use towards the infrastructure package. So, and when we would get it would be really July-ish of next year, and it would just work right in concert with our budget process next year. I mean, we could run it just like we're kind of doing it this year. If we get it, great, and then we could reallocate it based on that time.
I think we can all agree that if we, work to put funds somewhere, it would be towards safety, towards police. It's high on our priority list, but from, what are the chances that, we don't know, right? That we cannot get another additional police figure.
I would say they are not good now and they're
Yeah.
likely to get worse.
So-
Okay, so good news there. Good news there.
The problem is, because there's already been a shortage.
yeah.
And so each contract city was allocated a certain amount of vacancies that you must hold.
Yep.
We are not holding as many vacancies as we're supposed to right now because we have the bodies and no one's left.
Yeah.
So once some of our officers are let go because of the vaccine mandate, then we'll be at what we're required to hold those vacancies, and they won't fill anything
Right.
on top of that.
Sean?
How many we go
We're supposed to hold 2.6 vacancies. As far as what we'll lose with the mandate, 2 or 3.
Probably, yeah.
on top of that, so we'll be
Yeah.
down 5 officers?
Well, right now, we're only down 1 officer,
Okay.
so we'll be down 4.
Well, okay.
Yeah, and we're supposed to hold 2.6 as a
So we could only
vacancy.
hire
Two.
2, and we can only hire 2
But-
back.
Well,
But,
they don't, go ahead.
but I have to put the big but in there. When the firings happen from the vaccine mandate, the number of vacancies that the sheriff's office is holding is going to
Increase, which is gonna
which
increase
is
what
gonna
we have to
increase
hold.
our fair share.
Mhm.
So we're gonna go up
And,
over 3
and
or
they just
4.
don't have the bodies going through the academy to fill the spots.
Right.
So, sorry.
No, you were
I got like
first.
5 questions.
Yeah, I'll just- yeah.
Um,
I mean, I did-
And then there's just another one, I thought, well, something we need to think about then, backfilling or whatever, it's just the mental health of those officers, if they're gonna be on overtime all the time, I just don't know how we're gonna, anyway, I'm just throwing that another problem on the table.
So, no, it's a conversation we've had though, because we don't want to have to fill all those spots with mandatory overtime, because it would be worse. So we're going to have to go back to single person coverage instead of 2-person coverage.
All right. So I just had a couple of thoughts, and Casey, I may have to just come sit down with you, but I probably should have asked this question 5 years ago. I just don't understand the budget process and the revenue for the street fund and why it's always in the red. I mean, I haven't been able to figure that out, other than you mentioned that the initiative is restricted and we get it back and that sort of thing, but so I may have to talk to you, but if there's a quick primer on that, and why it always seems every 2 years that it's always going red, which to me, that means the expenses are going up and they've got to be continually going up, and I don't understand that either, why.
So the expenses will go up in perpetuity, right? They're always going to be going up because it's expensive and there's always need because our roads get used a ton, right? The issue is there's not a single designated source for maintenance for our streets in the state of Washington. And as much as we've lobbied for it, you've seen the legislature the last several years create, like House Bill 1590, create designated sources of revenue for items, that they've refused to do it for transportation. So their kind of compromise a couple of years ago was they put together a committee to discuss and evaluate the local transportation maintenance needs. And they discovered there's over $1 billion worth of needs in local jurisdictions and whatnot. But, and they developed ideas that would allow for designated revenue sources like councilmatic authority to do these kind of things and whatnot, but nothing's been approved right now. So the issue we're always in this is because it's always having to be paid out of our property tax and sales tax. And we could dump all of it into there and barely have enough to maintain all the things that need to be maintained. So it's this ever ebb and flow process because we don't have a designated source of revenue.
Coming from the state.
Well, at least authorized by the state. Yeah, what I would love to see is councilmatic authority to create that revenue, but they've not been willing to do that.
The only other pot of money that we have access to, but is not available currently, is the REIT funds, because we're using those for our long-term debt. I could maybe put another column in 2028 and show that we could, then maybe the street fund would pop back up. But it's a ways out. Maybe in 2024, when those public works trust fund loans are paid off, I might have a little excess, but it just depends on how the REIT funds are really cyclical too, right? Based on the building market. So those are also funds that are hard to rely on, and it would be hard to put those into the street fund as an ongoing revenue source to really rely on.
So if we don't have a dedicated source, I guess our options are kind of limited on what you're just basically saying, we're gonna have to continually subsidize this from the general fund until you, okay, well, that makes sense. So,
Or you can increase TBD.
that's what I was gonna say. So I remember we upped the tabs by $20, and do we have another $20?
Well, they're at
Yeah,
20.
they're
Yeah,
at
we
20.
can go to 40.
And can we do an increment of that, or?
Nope.
No, so it's all. or
I
nothing.
think
Okay.
you can do it by 10, can't you?
I believe so.
Can you not?
Anyway,
No, I think you
Okay.
can only do another
and
20.
that would be another similar $400,000.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to see what that looks like, putting that in. And then the ballot measure, how, if we went again next year, how soon before we start seeing that money come in? And
It depends on what election we would pick, but it also takes 75 days for Department of Revenue to kick that tax in, and then there's a 2-month lag. So,
half a year,
yeah, 6 months,
but
after the election,
correct.
yeah.
so it'd probably be a year from now before we even be able to
And-
do that election.
And part of the conversation we've had that we'll, of course, discuss at the summit is we haven't been successful 3 times asking for money for maintenance. And so the thought is, well, what if we ask for money for public safety? And then we can reallocate funds from our general fund to that. So,
Yeah, I mean, I'm just,
North Bend has it on their ballot this
public
year.
safety.
No,
Or-
the street, for TBD sales tax. So we can see what happens in
Right.
November for North Bend.
Right.
Were you done, Sean?
I think so.
Okay, Beth and then Jennifer. Thanks, Sean.
What we had been talking about officers, which is why it doesn't really relate to street fund, but since we talked about not being able as a city to pull out of the contract and get our own force. Has there ever been a discussion about partnering with Maple Valley and Black Diamond and doing a regional so that we can do what we need to do to take care of our cities and not have to rely on King County?
so
I'm just throwing that out there.
I have had those
Okay.
conversations. It's nothing we want to really get into publicly,
Yeah.
especially with King County employees sitting in the room right now. But no,
Yeah, but I mean,
so I will say there's several contract cities that we've met and talked about a South Sound Police Department.
okay, that's all I have to say.
Yeah, so there's definitely conversations going on right now. The issue is, would we be able to hire officers? And unless some rules were different
Mhm.
with that organization, we would be in the same trouble right now that other agencies are in. But there's definitely those conversations. I have also, I will say, I don't know if people are on, but I've also discussed with Kent as well about a partnership there.
Several years ago, Maple Valley did a study, didn't they?
Maple Valley has, ISQUAD did one a couple years ago, and all the studies that are done, Covington did one like 8 years ago, show that it would be more expensive to have our own than to contract, but that's really kind of beside the point now, because we're not being able to govern how we police in our communities nor control recruitment. So it's becoming more difficult. And more contract cities are getting closer to the point of saying, maybe it's time. So.
Jennifer, then Jared. Were you done, Beth?
I don't recall seeing in our legislative priorities discussion about having our lobbyists talk to legislators about this, and I was wondering if that's something we should consider to keep it on the table, to keep it in front of them, because I think I'm not a fan of kicking the can, though I realize why it needs to be done, but and the reason I'm not a fan of kicking the can is it doesn't give the public visibility as to the issues that we're facing. It also doesn't give our legislators that visibility as well. So I think it's important to keep it in front of them. So I think it would be a great idea to add this to our priorities and to have discussions with our neighboring cities to keep it up there. You know what I'm saying? Because we do keep talking about this, and clearly it's not a problem that's going away without a long-term solution.
Yeah, I think we did actually address it. And Brianna and Holly and I are on top of it.
Okay.
The problem is the makeup of our legislature changed a couple of years ago.
Right.
And since then, there's been very little talk about this issue. So this issue was progressing, and then the legislature changed. And since then, we have not been able to find legislators that are willing to really push this forward. There's absolutely lobbying for it going on.
Okay.
And I just wanted to pull up here real quick because I thought we did have a statement in there. If someone else has a question to ask, they can while I'm looking this up. But
Yeah, I can share it. What's next?
Go ahead,
Yeah, I
Jared.
was just gonna ask if the vacancy policy, is that a city policy? Is that a police union policy, or where does this policy come from?
It's a King County Sheriff's
King
Office
Sheriff's Office.
policy, so because they're short, the thought is unincorporated shouldn't have to hold all the vacancies. Contract cities should share in it.
When did they come up with that?
It was actually Sheriff Joe Hanknick.
It was like 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, it was Sheriff Herhart, when he was a sheriff, he did not require the contracts. to
Right.
carry a
Does
vacancy.
that, there a possibility that will get revisited with the new sheriff? You know?
Who knows?
Okay.
I
be
wouldn't say it's
revisited by
impossible. I have
Dow.
no idea.
So-
They're gonna-
Oh, right.
So Jennifer, it is on our priorities doc. Just that statement I made about the committee that established this and encouraging state legislators to now let's do something because we know the need is there. It's under our local transportation
Okay,
preservation and maintenance funding.
okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
All right. That's all I had on the forecast.
So I think what we want to do though is if the council has any thoughts about street fund, I don't know that we really kind of settled that. There is the option of ARPA, so we could go to ARPA right now and decide how we want to allocate those funds. Does that work?
And you put the TBD in there.
Sure.
Can I speak just for a second on the TBD, just to follow up on what you said? It says through MRC, it talks about TBD may impose, the $20 above 20, then that $20 has to be in place for 24 months. And it says up to 40. So it doesn't really clear. So it might.
I
be
think you
could go
can
in-
do a $10 one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then you can do an up to 50 though, if you've got 40 for two. So you're
Right.
technically, you go up to 50, but you have to do 2 years at 40
Wow.
before you can get to 50.
Mhm.
So
So if I put in, I'm just gonna keep it simple. This is,
That's on top of what we already have.
Yeah.
yes, so this is doubling it, going from 20 to 40. And I'm just gonna go down to the bottom line so you can see. That's what I would do. So this is your 10% threshold here, the margin that you're above. So you're meeting your fund balance requirements every year.
And what was it before?
Oh, yep, sorry.
Before it was in 2025,
It was-
we did below, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, 'cause it was.
And if you went to $10, what would that be? Over full 20? I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
No, this is good.
So 190. Actually, 190.
split your screen.
Oh, I know, I was going to, but I didn't know if that would make it even smaller for people to see.
2024, looks like we start on.
Yeah,
And if we put the ARPA funds on top of that?
Wait, that makes it-
So
that makes it worse because I cut it in half.
Yeah, we cut it
We
in
went from
half. So if
$20 to
if we went-
$10.
No, but I thought before, didn't it go into the negative in 2025 already?
It did, 'cause it
Correct.
was- yeah, because it was $20 she was adding. I said, what if we only added 10 to it?
Oh, I thought the original TBD of $20 now.
Is this
was-
worse than?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
So that just moved it up a little bit, a little bit, yeah, interesting.
yeah,
Okay, so that $20 would push us out at least for a while.
To 2028, probably.
Yeah.
2029.
mhm.
Oh,
And you could always remove that if you did do the sales tax measure at some
right,
point.
yeah.
So if we ended up doing it at 40, it would be the same as if we cut it out completely and did the top sales tax versus. Almost, well, we get a little more.
We get a little more with the
Yeah,
sales
We'd
tax.
get more with sales tax.
Yeah,
We,
definitely.
we'd get over $1 million with the sales tax.
1.2-ish.
Yeah.
If we did the full 2%. So if
Oh,
you-
yeah.
for every 1%, you get about 680.
680.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer to do the sales tax, but, you know, we gotta get that approved by the voters, so.
Yeah.
And what did you put the ARPA funds in? What did that do? Did you take out the?
So
is the ARPA funds going to replace the general fund subsidy?
it would for the
So
next few
we-
years.
So it'd stay the same, it's just your,
Well, no, because the subsidy right now, I only put at 60,000. And so this would be above and beyond that.
oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just gonna, I've got about 1.5-ish extra. And I can run it through those many years, 2022, 23, 24. Let's see what it does. So that gets us out. There's solid through 2025, and then 2026 is when it starts to dip.
And that's leaving the TBD at the $20.
Leaving the TBD at
Yeah.
$20.
And just
funding it
putting
with
in
ARPA.
1.5.
Yeah, so we could start the TBD if we wanted to in 2026 if the initiative did.
Right.
Mhm.
Huh.
The only thing I'll
Yeah, it
mention.
definitely buys a couple years.
Yeah,
which is nice,
for sure. And the only thing I'll mention with the ARPA funds is we're still waiting for the final rulings to come out. I'm just operating under the interim rules right now. So things, it's got the possibility for some things to change, but it's been pretty clear that it'll pay for infrastructure maintenance.
And keeping in mind, that's also keeping things relatively flat, not coming in with any other,
Cost.
That's no
Right.
overlays,
Right.
that's no
Right.
increases.
Yeah.
in,
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the current ARPA funds, not the second
Correct. This is
disbursement.
just our first
Okay.
distribution.
Yeah.
So that's got some potential, and next year when I get that, I could reallocate out some. I can only pay for so much in that fund. I can only tie it to maintenance, so I couldn't probably pay for the entire fund out of the ARPA money, but then we could add overlays. We could add an overlay program for a few years, or,
Sure.
there's some neat
Yeah.
things that we could do with it.
So the ARPA funds can be used for overlays,
Yep.
sidewalk,
Yep.
okay, anything for maintenance.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're ready to, or,
I can
yeah,
open up the ARPA spreadsheet. And we
yeah,
can
yeah, we should
Let's
probably
do
do
that.
that first.
I'm really
Oh,
excited.
how
It's your
nerdy
time
you
to
are.
shine, Casey.
So excited. I think I got a little red for that one. Accountants getting to play with this kind of money is, it's a big deal,
Tell me you're an accountant without telling me you're. an
right? Exactly. Let me show you my spreadsheet.
I love spreadsheets.
Yeah, good. Okay, let me go back and share this so other folks can see.
But you do it all anyways.
Finance for many years. Minor in finance. Math has always been my.
How long will it take
While
to
she's
set
getting
up-
that
to set
together,
up
we used to
lunch?
call
Just
it
2 minutes?
spreadsheets.
Uh,
Fred Bridge, or used to
Maybe I'll
help
ask
us
it,
out,
maybe
because
rather
he had
than-
them all embedded
Do
with
three
all these
down
different
and then
things,
come
so we
across.
call
So
them
go
spreadsheets.
1,
So,
5, 9, and then go 3, 5, 7.
Jeff, if you want, we could start, Casey could review this spreadsheet and then maybe at 11 break and grab some food for lunch.
Sure.
We'll just need a couple minutes to set that out and then we can come back and deliberate. Does
Perfect.
that work?
That sounds great.
Okay.
So these numbers are just more of the detail that rolls into those summary slides that just showed like human services, 515,000, just the little pots. So this is really just more of the details. So this is how much money we currently have in our pocket. We've already received this, it's already cash in the bank. And this is just some ideas that we got from human services providers, from staff. We reached out to the water district, the sewer district. Actually, the sewer district reached out to us this time, so.
And they were like non-responsive during the
Last
CARES
time.
Act.
I remember
Yes.
that.
Yeah, yeah, it was weird.
The worst was, well, I won't say it. on-
Don't they get
I forgot
ARPA
what
funds
they were.
also?
So,
No, they don't.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I
No,
was just so
districts
surprised. I
don't
was
get
like,
it.
everyone's paying their bills? That's shocking.
but
It was weird, yeah.
I will mention that there's a lot of other places folks can get utility assistance right now also. So if we were to also fund by Maple Place, for instance, they help with utility
Yeah.
aid as well. So there's lots of little pots out there. So the Covington Water District currently says they're about $212,000-ish past due accounts for Covington residents. Stews Creek Water and Sewer is about 100,000. Actually, just this morning, got an update from them. They're about $200,000 now too. But
that just Covington residents? or
just
is that-
Covington residents.
That's what they'll tell us.
That's what they're, yeah.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, so there is some eligibility issues though with giving money for past due customers. The way the ARPA funds work, or one of the restrictions is they're really trying to target the money to the most impacted communities. So folks that are like 60% and below of the median income level in Covington. And so that would have to be one of our criteria when issuing these funds out to the utility districts, and it'd be done like on a reimbursement basis as well. They would go in and they would help the folks pay off these accounts, then they would apply to us to reimburse them for those dollar amounts. A lot of cities around us are doing kind of a payment program where some folks have to show some kind of good faith payment, even if it's just a $25 payment on their account. And then the city comes in and helps them out with the rest. So there's definitely some options. Covington Water District, when we had the CARES Act funding, they spent about 16,000 of the 50,000 we gave them. And the Sioux Creek Water and Sewer District spent about $5,000 of the $50,000 that we gave them. I will mention it was a pretty short turnaround time. We didn't get that CARES Act funding for a long time, whereas this is going till 2024.
We did have some question too about how well they got the word out to their customers that this was available.
Yeah. They have hired staff to actually help with a lot of these past due.
Yeah, I
accounts,
think they're more
just-
set up now.
Yeah. So I feel like they could handle this type of program. It would be a lot on them. They would have to there'd be income thresholds that they'd have to verify. It would be some work for them for sure.
So that would be interesting for the law, just get that ground truth for them. How many people would actually, what's that amount that would actually qualify?
Right.
Because it's not gonna be the entire 200,000.
No, exactly.
So
And
whatever that is would be helpful for us. so.
Yeah.
But I don't think they could get that
They-
easily.
No, they wouldn't know that until someone applies for it.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
They'd
Oh,
have to
man.
submit some
Right.
tax information,
Okay.
go through some income.
Oh.
And they'd
checks.
have, right, like reaching out to all of those people, getting them to answer the phone from
Yeah.
the utilities that they're
Right.
overdue on. I
They,
mean, there's
that's
a
exactly
lot
the
of
problem they ran
obstacles.
into before. And they're like, we're trying to give you money if you will just call us back.
Well, you believe it.
Yeah, sure you
We're
are.
trying to get you money, hope
All
you
we need
owe
is
us
your
money.
information. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And your Amazon bill at the same time.
I will say some of the things that they ran into though, is because people got the CARES Act money, they stopped paying their bills because they were hoping that there would be another round.
Yeah.
Right. So they've run into a lot of that too with their customers. So you can't see my proposal because I shrunk it for you, but we proposed to give them 50. And maybe when that need comes back, once people apply, if it's really like more staggering number, I mean, we can revisit that, but
That's to both, Sioux Creek.
a
and-
50 or 25.
25
piece.
each.
25. And that's reimbursement. We're not just
Correct.
giving them that
No.
money and then, okay, so
It has to be
they
done on a
would
reimbursement
show us
basis.
that somebody applied
Mhm.
and, okay.
And they were
Right.
really good last time. We got a client list, we got an address list, and we don't have Sean currently, but he checked it against the GIS system, made sure they were all
Very
Covington
good.
residents,
Okay.
and definitely some checks in place.
Okay.
I didn't realize I was scrolled down, so I'm gonna pop back up to the top here. Sorry about that. Okay, so for revenue losses, this is the maximum that I currently got calculated, it's almost $1.9 million. Again, those final rules haven't come out. I've based it on their interim rulings right now. This is how much I think I can claim for revenue losses. These are some of the things that we're hoping to take out of those dollars. We've got some administration costs. My senior accountant that's running the grants will be doing a lot for the ARPA projects. And so we can charge a lot of her time against the grant, which will then be a cost savings in the general fund. And that's not something that you currently see in the forecast, but you would see potentially $100,000 drop in expenses that I can offset with these dollars. PPE, we've just got some things budgeted for cleaning and masks and things like that. Hiring incentives, these are some of the things that Ethan was talking about. We've kind of put a little pot of money away so that we can have folks meet certain thresholds and guidelines with training and things like that. And we can give them some hiring incentives. Again, for our recreation as well too, possibly. HVAC for the police department. I think I mentioned that we can do HVAC upgrades to help with circulation and things like that in the police department. I didn't realize I had this one in here twice. So this has already been included in the estimated actuals
For 2021.
for 2021. It's the council room AV. So I will actually add this back into kind of the unallocated dollar amount, but I haven't done that yet. Digital signatures and routing. This came to you guys before for policy decision, but this is just the DocuSign cost. Springbrook upgrade, I get this, again, this is a decision card that's currently in the general fund. So you'll also see those decision card numbers go down if I move this to ARPA. This is just the upgrade of moving us to the most current version. Phone system replacement. We currently have money put away in our equipment replacement fund for our phone system replacement, but we feel like there's going to be a component that would be ARPA eligible for remoting our phones offsite. So we can offset that right there and save us some dollars on the backside. And then most of these
And this,
are,
this would have been the replacement thing we talked about as well, when we talked about city cell phone for council and the app that would come with this. So that's part of that.
and then I'm not going to be able to talk to all these. I don't know, Don, if you know a lot of what all of these are, but this is Mason's wish list. So these are all of the things that he gave me as proposals, and I have the proposals here. So if anybody's interested, I can look up the detail and find out exactly what it is. But these are all his proposals that he felt would be ARPA eligible. Just some cloud-based, some network security.
Most of it's all really security
Yeah.
basis with
Cybersecurity.
everything we've noticed with all attacks and stuff and more remoting and more. It's basically all in line with that to try to be more nimble or responsive or protected and all of that, depending on if it's attacked or whatever. So that's a lot of what it is.
Yeah. And this is another one, the $6,000 that's already included in a decision card. So again, if this looks good, then I'll go ahead and take that out of the decision cards and move it into our ARPA funds. And it'll be a reduction in expenses for the general fund. He's got some work he'd like to do on some mobile workstations. He didn't really have a good idea for that one yet. Network penetration testing. Again, all of these are the cybersecurity things. Small business grants. The only reason I have this one highlighted is it was just an accounting to make it balance for me. It's just this number and this number getting me my 150,000. It's just taking a little bit out of the revenue losses category. And again, like we mentioned, this is just how much we spent last time that we did it. Again, it was a really quick turnaround. You might see a lot more interest this time around. I will say there are some restrictions though with businesses. If they've already received a pot of money from somebody, they may not be eligible for our pot of money. So you can't kind of double dip in the same pot of ARPA money.
I do want to point out the
Oh, sorry.
1.4 million there, that balance. That's the money we would use if council wanted to subsidize the street fund.
Yep.
The money that's left over from the lost revenue.
Yeah. Again, yeah, and I'm going to add about 70,000 to that for the AV equipment that we've already gotten the estimated actuals. And there's really, I can do this provision of government services. It's pretty darn broad. So there's a lot of really kind of exciting things that you could do with that money. And if I know, I'm get really excited about this, but if we didn't give, I mean, streets needs some of it, they may not need all of it, but there's also some things that we could do. I was thinking about like the vehicle reserve that we currently have, that $200,000 that we've put away. Well, that's to tap into if we have any shortages over the next few years with any of the vehicles that we want to replace. Well, I could use ARPA money instead and leave our vehicle reserve alone. So it could be prudent to maybe leave a little pot of money, you know, $100,000 or so to use for unanticipated things that come up between now and when we maybe get that next tranche of money.
And both tranches have to be committed by 2024, used by 2026.
Correct.
So, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So really, this is just focusing on that first distribution that we have in our hands, anticipating maybe we won't get that second distribution. All right, and so for human services, again, like Regan mentioned, we Julie sent an email out to all our current providers and basically said, we've got this pot of money. What's your need? If the sky was the limit, what could we do for you to make things easier on you? A lot of these would qualify. There's a few that we're not so sure would qualify. They really have to be COVID related for the human services stuff. if there's things like, for instance, like this children's therapy center, this is a big dollar amount here, but really what this entails is just the therapists were going out into the homes and they were helping all of these kids with their therapy needs. Well, now due to COVID, they can't go to the homes. So they're having to have those folks come in and it's causing more staff resource issues and just, they've got to be social distance and they've got to have separate areas set up and things like that. So that definitely is COVID related.
So are these numbers from, on the human services side, are those numbers that they gave us?
Yes.
Okay.
And again, this is reimbursement basis. So there would be all of the checks and balances in place. Just, it would basically be treated just like our current human services providers contracts are treated. They'd have goals. They'd Julie be monitoring them. They'd have to have subrecipient agreements. And like I mentioned, there's a couple that we're not sure. The reason that I have $515,000 here that was submitted, why we have that lower dollar amount is really just this one vendor currently that I backed out that I know for sure isn't eligible. Any questions on the human services?
I guess I'm looking at the support services for domestic violence survivors and knowing that that was a huge thing for COVID and maybe we will get this, not saying we haven't. It just seems like that is a huge need right now because there's a lot of folks that have been dealing with that. And I don't, again, we're talking about what happened in the past versus how do we look at the next year or two. And that's kind of why I'm also wondering about the pediatric therapy for kids, because, you know, initially people weren't able to go into homes, but now with, you know, vaccinations and things like that, is that we're looking at moving forward, not
Right. We can retro pay back to March 3rd
of this year.
of this year. But what they've given us is really kind of a needs assessment. There would still have to be an application process and we would kind of just start the process really all over again and then revet everything. Because when Dawn applied for this $10,000, that may have been what they needed right this second. But maybe if we're telling them these dollars go all the way to, if we're looking at a budget cycle, all the way to 2022, like really what does that look like for them? And then there's also on our application that we sent out, our needs assessment that we sent out, Dawn may have had other pots of money that they're already getting.
Sure.
So they asked for less.
What we're really looking for, this was just to give the council an
Yeah,
idea,
Sure.
but what we're looking for from the council is what dollar amount would the council want to put into human services?
Right,
And then from there, we can open up an application process.
exactly.
Yeah.
This is just an idea of the kind of things that are
Yeah.
out there right now with our current providers. Okay, so we already did utility districts. And then our city projects. So these are projects that we feel are eligible through ARPA because they're part of the MPDES compliance project list, right?
Yeah, it's actually new infrastructure pieces, which is one of the caveats is that it's, I think they're looking at the state revolving fund as far as determining that criteria. And so these would be projects that are maintenance, but actually new infrastructure. So it has to be new infrastructure. So water quality type things before. So a lot of these places are just that. They're now discharging currently untreated into Jenkins Creek or different bodies of water. And so what these would do is you'd be coming in there and having like filter vaults or different things like that to treat the water before it's, so that would bring you into compliance. Obviously, you're trying to do all of that. So these are on the reason they're on the list is they need to be done. But these are one of the pieces that would actually qualify.
And so the reason why we picked this particular project, well, first off, this project, the Pipe Lake outfill retrofit is the one that we submitted to the state to use part of their ARPA funds. So this $420,000 one, the Jenkins Creek outfall retrofit is the project that's currently next in line to be shovel ready. It's at 60% design currently. So that's why we prioritize that one. And again, like I mentioned, they're also doing Tamarack next year. So they've got quite a few projects in the pipeline.
And that would be a project, a good example of Tamarack is more of a maintenance. It's not a new infrastructure. So they're changing the slopes and things like that, but you still have a pond, it's still doing ultimately what it's doing. These cases, you're coming in actually placing in new infrastructure, something that is not there now.
And then potentially when we get that next distribution, if we get it next July, I will mention on my revenue losses, that revenue loss number that I calculated was just our loss that we incurred in 2020 based on 2019's numbers. So they compared 2019 and 2020, and that's the number I was able to calculate. I still have 3 more calculation periods. I can calculate at the end of 2021, 2022, and 2023 to see if I have any more revenue losses. I have no idea if I'm going to yet. So my portion that I would ask for out of the next distribution could be nothing. There could be no more revenue losses coming. And in that case, we've got quite a bit of money to potentially do some more of these infrastructure projects if we wanted to in the future. There's also a big pot that is not on here that Ben just sent me yesterday that were potential land purchases that we could also do for future swim sites.
Yeah, there's places where typically, again, that's a challenge for us, where a lot of like funding for parks, they have a little bit more options for purchasing. But usually in our cases for capital type things for both streets and for swim, usually is a lot of times eligible for that. So the actual ability to purchase property is also an option. So like there's places, for instance, like Crystal View, where we don't have a place to place it. So we do now because we went through a grant and got that. But I'm just saying that would actually build that. Those are examples of places where we're trying to put like a pond or some sort of facility to treat developments that didn't have that before.
Beth?
So I guess that actually opens up a whole nother can of questions for me, because Crystal View is an older community. Are we saying that that was never put in when it was originally put in?
Correct.
So it wasn't, well, of course, it was probably built even before.
A lot of
Before the city was incorporated.
Before we,
Correct.
that's where a lot of these problems.
A lot of these
Right,
things we're
right.
dealing with is inherited.
Yeah, okay. And but moving forward, we're requiring that, so these are just kind of backfilling issues. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of going back to the whole NPDS compliance and that type of thing is basically addressing all of that. So outfalls, all of that. So.
Thank you.
So really, like Regan mentioned, what we're kind of looking for as far as direction is pots of money. Like how much would you like to allocate and keep towards revenue losses and fund kind of all those IT things and administration, that type of things? How much you would like to do for human services,
Small business grants.
small business grants, infrastructure, really kind of those pots of money. And then what you'll see it come back to you as is I will just have on the changes worksheet, I will just list those items with those pots of money, and then they'll show up in folks' space budgets. So for example, like in the personnel budget, you'll see human services, $500,000. And then we'll be coming back to you with one of 2 ways. Either the Human Services Commission basically reopening a funding cycle, bringing it back to you in the form of a blue sheet for your approval. We'll probably have an additional public hearing on that next year just to do the community outreach requirement. This is part of the ARPA funds. Again, anything that's over Regan's signature authority will be coming back if we purchase a new dump truck out of the government provisions money or anything like that, that's kind of what it would look like. It would just be those pots of money, and then you would be asking staff how to distribute those funds in the base budget.
Can you slide over
Yep.
so you can see what you're funding for swim? Just the
Just
420,000.
this one project, because like I
Okay.
said, this one has already been applied to through the state for funding.
That was
Okay.
on our legislative priorities.
And then they also have that third project already in the works in the
Okay.
base budget.
Can we do a contingent amount for the human services, sorry? I know, Regan, you mentioned that you'd like to talk to them first. And
The
if-
commission?
Yes,
Uh-huh.
correct, human services, yes. So if we, if they do want to tackle that big bite, if we decide we would do that, and then if not, then, what's plan B? Where would half of that go?
Right.
Can we do that today? I mean,
Yeah,
is that
I mean, we
something
can
we
kind
can
of do
do?
like a priority if only 400,000 comes in for human services, but you've allocated 500, maybe that 100,000 rolls down and
Exactly.
knocks out the infiltration trench in this
Exactly.
one fund or something like that. You can set a kind of a rolling order of priority. The revenue losses, I can't really change anything there. That number is what it is, and I can't increase it. I couldn't add more to it if I wanted to. I could take away from it. I could take away from the revenue losses and move it to any other category. But I couldn't take the extra 100,000 if I had it in human services and move it up to there. So it's more broad, more flexible, but
Thinking about small businesses again, and I don't know if any of you have been to the Seattle area and seen all of the closed businesses.
Right.
There are a lot of them. I think about, keep thinking about them. So with the vaccine mandate and the additional pressure that is causing, would that impact their access to these funds? Like, does that allow maybe broader access, because we are unique, because that's not a federal mandate, right?
right.
So I'm curious if that added
Do you mean the
pressure-
verification that businesses are required to do? Okay.
if that added obstacle for them would broaden their access, or does it maybe even, is it a factor? Can we use it as a factor?
My
I guess
guess
that's what I'm
is
trying to say.
I could, that could fall under staffing. Like I can take,
Yeah.
I can help them with revenue losses. I can help them with staffing if they needed to have somebody part-time stand at the door to verify vaccine
Well,
cards.
and I'm thinking,
Right.
which is great, but I'm also thinking about now they're not getting as many customers.
Right. And that's something that they can apply for. Revenue losses
Yes.
for a business is one of the
Okay,
things that
okay.
that's a criteria.
Yeah, I mean, I guess looking at this overall, I think maybe the small business needs to be higher, but maybe not. But otherwise, this is really great information.
So what would you like from us right now?
I think if we want to break for lunch, we can
Okay.
do that and then come back and talk about how and if the council wants to allocate these funds to which bucket.
Perfect. So then let's break for lunch. Stop the recording and
Are we getting lunch for?
Regan, what do you think? 30 minutes, 45 minutes?
Oh, well, I was gonna say 15 or 20, but whatever you want.
Oh, there's.
I mean, we can eat while we work too.
Okay,
you
so
know.
recording. Welcome back to our budget retreat discussion. Appreciate everything. Krista, thank you for getting everything set up. And Brian, thank you for helping get it all set up as well. And we're moving back into budget deliberations. And Casey and Regan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I think Casey and I put together kind of some questions that maybe help drive council's discussion here. Questions that'll help us in next steps. And so the first one is, how much money from ARPA does the council want to put in each of the different pots that we have? We've mentioned several of those and pull those up again. Do we want Human Services Commission involved in that application process like they do, or would you like us to handle that in-house? The next one is, do you want to give some of the excess ARPA funds from the lost revenue to the street fund? It would be good to have at least about 380,000 of that in the next couple years, if that's something the council wants to do. And then also what we'd suggest, and I think Casey mentioned keeping maybe $100,000 pot of that ARPA around for expenses that may arise. And I'd suggest maybe we up that a little bit to about 200,000 as kind of an offset. So those would really kind of be the questions that we need to know that could help us kind of move forward on how we allocate ARPA and street.
Okay, so let's start with ARPA fund. Let's just go in the order you had them listed.
Okay.
Does that
Wanna
work?
pull those up? Yeah.
I would, it's friendly amendment, I would just take if we're gonna do the end of time, unallocated, just take that right off the top now, so that we don't get through and allocate all this money and then go, oh, we don't have the 200,000.
Well, I think that's in your list.
Is it one of the lists?
No, the 200,000 is not.
So I would just take that.
So what that would mean is we have, where are you at, Case? Okay, so maybe we can write out, we've got a human services pot, we'd want small business grants, lost revenue, and utility. And then swim. Is that it? And we'll put,
IT.
That's under loss.
yeah, it's kind of included under that.
Thank you.
So, but you don't have the 100 or 200,000 sitting up there for set aside?
I have it right here, but I can just break it out.
Yeah. let's
Okay,
do
It's
that.
in what?
it's in that first pot.
We'll create it right here so that those numbers are properly reflected.
I mean, if everyone agrees that we should do that, that's what I would take that right off the top.
I think it's just a good idea.
Because that's included in that pot of 1.898.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so this is what you have left to kind of, oh, hold
Okay.
on, I forgot I've got this 70,000 here. This is actually already taken care of.
Okay,
There you go.
that's, we have to allocate.
So the 1.2, that's what you can choose to do different things with, like the street fund or something like that. There is, we gave some options of how much to put into lost revenue, which are all those right there. The utilities, the human services funding. So if those are the amounts the council would like, you can confirm that, or if you want to change them up, and the small business grant as well, just let us know what those amounts are and what you'd like to do there.
So if council concurs, let's start with where the small business grants are and work down.
Okay.
That way, knowing that we have this other pot to work with.
Sure.
Because if we decide that we want to raise, lower, or agree with what's there, that would, so any changes that we make below to increase would come out of that,
Lost revenue.
Correct.
the lost revenue, the portion of government services.
Yep.
So is everybody
Okay.
comfortable with the 150,000 for small business grants? It's 139,062 there, but part of that goes up to administration of the 10, so the combine of the 10,900.
Yeah.
Makes it 150,
Yep.
because we're keeping it in-house this time.
Correct.
Beth?
Yeah, so just to reiterate, though, like we're, the figures that you had given us the other day had both trenches, but we're not banking on the second
Yeah,
one, right?
this is
as
just
far as
allocating
concerned.
the first distribution that we've received.
So we're not really gonna touch the swim, because clearly all of it added up to 5.7.
We're just allocating just one swim project right
Yeah.
now.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, we're only doing up to 2.5.
Perfect, yeah, thanks. Okay, yeah.
That's what we
2.9.
submitted. If
That's-
council
yeah,
wants to
that's
change
just-
something.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. that makes sense.
Good. Does council feel comfortable with the 150 for small business grants?
Can I ask just really quickly? I know you said there was less than expected last time around. Did the full 150 get absorbed though?
Yes.
Yeah, that's that's what we spent last time.
Yeah.
It was 150.
Okay, so it looks like there's consensus for the 150 for small business. Going down to human services, staff is suggesting 450,000. And then Region is going to reach out to Human Service Commission to see if they want to work with that. Otherwise, it would stay in-house or with staff. Is council good with the 450,000?
So if they say they can't allocate this, that 450 would come to us for human services, or we could allocate it to other projects.
It would come to staff to do.
You mean if we didn't spend that entire amount?
So we're looking at adding 450,000 to those projects, right? And asking human services to allocate that if they want to.
Right.
So they say they don't want to. We're taking it back, but we're gonna allocate it to those.
Yeah.
And I would work with Julie.
Yeah, that's-
All or nothing?
yeah, okay.
No,
So-
No,
450.
But to them, would that be an all or nothing to them, to human services? Could they come back and say, we'd like 200 of that because we have the capacity?
Well, the council could decide right now just to say,
Right.
staff, you just do it. But if you want the Human Service Commission to be part of it, then let us know and we'll take it to them. And if they're like, we just can't handle this additional work, then we'll take it on.
All or nothing.
And I just want to put in a plug as well. If the council says we'll give you 450 for human services to fund human services agencies, it may be these ones here, but probably different amounts. It could be some different human services agencies, but just a heads up on
Not
that.
all of our providers responded,
Yeah.
so there could be more folks, and then we would just allocate it on a lesser percentage or something.
Joe,
I would actually think having staff work the ARPA funds for human services would be better, just because it seems when human services, they have a tough time just with the base budget that they have, just going through all of the applications. It seems like it's a long, tedious process on its own. Granted, they always say we wish we had more money, but I feel like if we're giving them more money, they're gonna say this is an even more tedious process now.
Yeah, and it's different criteria we'd have to train them on to review. The ARPA criteria will be different than what their criteria is that they use. But
Yeah, I was just gonna ask the same thing as far as like, what is the role, what role do we want human services to play? Like, should the commission, because it is a lot of work. I mean, that's why we have staff. Human services oversees it and gives recommendations, and I mean, if they want to do some of that work, they can, but it just seems like staff would be the one that would actually execute it. I mean, it's not, right?
Yeah, and I'll just mention, I feel like with our new accountant, she's a grant accountant, and we've got the capacity. I mean, it'd be a lot of work, definitely, but, and then again, her time would be charged. to the grant.
Yeah.
okay, Jennifer,
And if it is handled by staff, I would just ask that we ensure that whatever amounts go to whatever orgs is definitely communicated
that they know
very
about
clearly.
it.
So
Yeah.
when they're going through their annual process, that they know who's gotten what
I can
already.
do a presentation to them, and then
Yeah.
I'll be bringing it back to you guys to show
Okay.
you what our recommendations are, and then we'll hold a public hearing as well.
Awesome.
so because ARPA funds have different requirements, Regan, if I heard you right, you said that you'd have to work with human services and train them on the different requirements. So that's even going to be a heavier load for them to carry. So I agree with Joe that we keep it in-house, but like Jennifer said, let human services know what we're.
Keep them notified of all the decisions.
Yeah, keep them notified. I mean, nothing against human services, because they do an awesome job of what the funds that they have. But then putting the extra workload on them, having to go through all this extra training for that. I'm comfortable with keeping it in-house as well, but what does the rest of council feel?
I would agree on that. How would them do?
Okay, so it's consensus to just go ahead and Casey, work through your senior accountant and with Regan and
Julie, yeah.
Julie, yeah, and definitely Julie, to do it in-house and just keep human services apprised of what the outcome is.
Okay, we'll do that.
And you're comfortable with the 450,000?
I am. It would have, okay, council's comfortable with the 450. 450,600.
Yeah.
It's moved to utilities. 50,000, that's 25,000 for Covington Water and 25,000 for Sue's Creek. Through the process that Regan stated, with them applying for it and keeping track. Is council consensus with that?
Yes.
Okay, you have consensus with the 50,000 for that. Swim funds, the 420,000 for the one project for this round, Jenkins Creek outfall retrofits. Is council, Sean?
And why was that one? It's not even.
The other one's already funded.
That
So-
one's
All
already
those
been-
are funded.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
not necessarily. The pipe lake for 210, that's what we're putting on our legislative priorities to ask the state to fund. And then the Crystal View outfall retrofit, that's funded already for the next year. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Right?
No, no,
No.
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 Did I mix them
Tamarack,
up?
it's not on
Tamara,
here.
it's not on that.
Oh, it's
list.
not on
Yeah.
there. Okay.
This is the one we've submitted to the state. We're hoping to get
Gotcha.
through the
Yeah.
state.
Oh, okay.
Um, This one this one's our most shovel-ready project.
Yeah.
We're ready to go on it.
And that's the second most
And this is the
shovel-ready,
second.
60% design. The other pieces don't have design. Were completed on those lower ones. So.
Yeah.
So the council wanted to do more swim. The Crystal View outfall retrofit for 535 would be the next best option.
And what would the design portion only be?
The cost,
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, Don?
Technically, I think we have ranking over, is that right?
Yeah, this is ranking over here.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
That's ranking.
this is number one, number two. I accidentally deleted this. I'll have to go back. I
Yeah,
think it was
okay.
82,000.
Hold on, I got that in my pocket.
Wait, if you're
We'll call it the Harjehausen swim project.
always what you wanted.
Two things. I would say in general, to someone asked about cost for design, I would say generally you're talking about 15-20% for design costs for out of those numbers of the ones that are the 535 and below. You would take probably something along those lines for design cost. If you just broke that out, those are obviously included in those costs for design and stuff too. So.
And we can always come back if this one
Yeah.
doesn't get funded through the state.
Right.
I can use this money to get them started on this one since they're ready to go. And then we could revisit it if we get that next distribution in July.
Well, but do we have the bandwidth to support if we wanted to support 3 and 4 as well? And then use that money to support number 1 if that falls through? Do you have the bandwidth to support all of those?
We have a number, that's a little bit where we're getting a number of other like swim maintenance projects we have in the list too. We have the Tamarack Pond and we have
Right,
some other pieces.
right.
So it might be a little bit tough for us to pull all those, to make those all like ready, especially if we're not sure if we, all of a sudden we get pipe lake and we get money for that, then we got to roll on that too. So we're trying to make sure we're able to deliver that project for sure, especially if we're asking for money from the state.
Okay.
So we can definitely evaluate how things go. If that's the area, say this is the bucket of money. And then, that's what we'd like to do. I think that makes the most sense. But if some of that changes with the way the funding comes in with the state or something along those lines, we're definitely willing to reevaluate that. We can come back and talk about what we
Okay.
think would be the best to go forward. So.
Okay.
Okay, Beth,
So we are talking about 4 year, well, at this point, almost 5 years, right? We have to use it for 2026.
Mhm.
So would like the top priority ones, would it make sense to allocate a couple of them? Because we know we're not gonna do it like next year or even the year after that, or maybe not even the year after that. So that we get what staff is most concerned with on the list.
And are you-
If
We're
I
not
can
gonna
just,
do all of them.
if I can just address that, one of the things to consider is we can do additional ones than what we've stated there, than the 2 that we hope that council will fund 1 and the state to fund 1. Is that swim does have a designated revenue source with funds per the needs assessment, not needs assessment, but
Great city.
yeah, the rate study to determine what we need to charge in rates to pay for these projects. Where streets, because anything we pay above what this, we'll have to take out of what the council is going to consider allocating to the street fund. And so that's just, remember to weigh that in balance.
Yeah, I guess I wasn't thinking about doing all of them, but like adding a couple more to the list. We would still have a cushion there.
I look at almost like those to some extent also, just like Regan was saying, if there's something, we've got plenty of things that would qualify, like we can definitely, we've got a list of things we can fill, so there's definitely not a concern with that. But like Regan said too, is we have those, that designated swim funding to help with that, along with other grants and stuff that we can apply for some of these as well. So it's kind of like taking those into consideration, especially if there's other pieces that's going to draw down from that may not have as many options.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the number 5s, we haven't even started design on yet, correct?
Actually, anything below 2, we have not
Okay.
technically.
okay. So staff's asking for 420. Is council good with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I just want to make sure we give them more.
Yep.
Well, and if we get the second tranche next year, we'll be back here again to talk about,
Another
yeah.
Okay, so then that leaves us going back up to the top. With the one, that leaves us 1.89, well, 1.39 or 1.297, 166. Because that's leaving 200,000 in reserve for anything. So the question is, of that 1.297, 297, what portion of that would we like to put into streets? If council has a desire for that, Joe.
I want to put 85% into it, into streets.
Okay, and then so Regan, you want what we want to put into streets and then we just spread it out over 3 years? How are we looking at that?
We'd probably just fund it, whatever the allocation is for next year, and then keep the excess in reserve and allocate it during the next couple of year budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that we can look at it each year.
So
all of it, Joe?
Yeah. Keep a 15% buffer just in case we run into unexpected issues.
We have 200K already.
Yeah, but
You
a
want
little,
more of a buffer?
more of a buffer because you never know, one day we might wind up hitting power lines underneath that we didn't know about.
So allocating it bill for street.
Allocating it for street, but hold as a reserve, just in case we run into problems we didn't see or.
And another option to do what Joe's explaining is, let's say you allocate 400,000 for 2022, and then keep the rest of the 800,000 in a reserve, and then can be reassessed
If they need it.
next year or as it's needed.
Could we,
no, go ahead, Beth.
could we start like a ARPA reserve fund for streets? Like, is that kind of it's not the reserve, general fund reserve money, but it's.
I can't move it over. It's it's still on a reimbursement basis.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
they
yeah.
have to spend it before I can give it to them. So that's why we were kind of thinking we could move it in there each budget year. So I have to keep it in the ARPA fund until
It's
the street
used.
fund has spent those funds, and then I can transfer them in.
And
Christina,
that ARPA fund is basically the lost revenue, correct? The
Yeah.
biggest bucket is the
Yeah.
lost revenue. We do this every year. It only makes sense to me personally that we keep most of the ARPA funds where we can access them for multiple reasons, right? For uses. So if the street fund needs more next year, we visit this bucket and pull from there. We've already discussed it. We know it's there. We allocated for it, but to see it all together, I would recommend keeping most of it in the, lost revenue bucket.
Yeah, it'll stay.
okay, what is the rest of council? You comfortable
I'm
moving it
comfortable putting it all in there.
to roads or streets?
Streets.
And again, you have the opportunity to revisit it the same time next year. if you-
Okay,
Yeah.
So putting all 1.2 million in for 2021 or 22?
is council comfortable? with
Is that what you're
No,
saying,
I can't
Jennifer?
move it
Well,
all
I
in.
thought you were gonna
Yeah.
just put in what you needed
Yeah.
for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like 400,000 maybe, case with that probably, we need at least 380.
Yeah, 380 made it.
Yeah, so it's all going to streets, but
Yeah,
like
we'll allocate
over-
it each
yeah.
budget year.
I'll move it each budget year.
Okay,
Anything, John?
Council.
since it has to be reimbursed.
Yeah.
okay, so there's council consensus to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'll
It's a high need.
Okay.
reserve this whole thing in the general fund. I'll move 380,000 to the street fund for 2022. So
Correct.
it'll go down by that dollar amount. And then we'll look at it again next year during next budget cycle, and we'll move what we need
Yep.
for 2023, then 2024. So,
Yeah, is there gonna be an easy way to like, for anyone that like wants to access the document or to know where that is, like just to put a note, like, if it's just a note in the file of this is
Oh, yeah.
on, 10:30, council decided this was gonna go in and meets increments. So that we don't forget if we're looking at it going, oh, what do I have that much? Oh, yeah, so we did it we're saving it for later, right?
I'll have it as a note in my reserves
Okay.
for the budget document. And then I don't know how the minutes are done for this type of workshop, if that will,
General, but
yeah.
I can include details if you want.
I think the important thing is that it's recorded in the budget, which is what
Yeah,
it will be.
It will
Yeah.
be. And it'll show up on your list of reserves. Now you'll have a new one.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
That's what I was
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah, okay, yeah.
All right. So we've discussed that. Any
Sorry, how much did we put towards the street? Was it
380?
380?
for next year with the rest of it reserved for streets for future years?
And so I think the assumption then is all the allocations we've made for the other lost revenue funding, the council is okay with,
Yes,
like all the IT stuff and.
definitely.
And I'll make those changes, and I'll take those decision cards that are currently funded out of the general fund, and I'll move them over to the ARPA fund.
And are we gonna get an update for I was just mobile workstations or?
Yeah, I'll talk to Mason. That's something that we could also take out of that, this extra pot if we needed it.
You don't need to know what's on
You know what,
there.
actually, I think we all need mobile work. We're all at home.
I was gonna suggest they get us all some Surface laptops, for our council needs.
All right, anything else you need from us for ARPA
Well,
funds?
Joe, is that something you wanted to bring up?
I mean, I don't know.
Okay.
We got a paper streets, so
Yeah.
we'll hold off on my thoughts until.
Okay.
Solid Wi-Fi.
Yeah. So I think at this point, it's really just comes down to any questions or changes the council would like to see made in what we presented earlier, each department. And if not, then the next step will be we'll formalize, plug in all this and bring it back to you and could be adopting late November, early December for adoption.
Does council have any questions on the funded decision cards and anything else that's been brought up?
I have one minor question about the pool car. Does every employee get to drive it? I mean, is there,
Yeah,
how does
so
our insurance
it's-
cover that? I'm just thinking of all those, I have teenagers. all around the business. I have teenagers. I've had one drive through my garage door,
So
that's
it
why
was
I'm
a
asking.
30-something $1,000 decision car that was submitted, and it's a vehicle that doesn't get used very often. And so I said, we can get something used for this. We did have a thought of, they've got an old 2001 Dodge Dakota, I think, truck in Public Works. I thought we could throw a couple $1,000s into that, fix it up and leave it at the pool. And that's still one of the options we may do. But it's just, they have to run to Home Depot quite often. Ethan could answer better, but make little errands. And right now they're using their personal vehicles, and then we have to calculate mileage, reimburse them for mileage. It's just to cover all those kind of errands.
So all employees get to drive it?
No.
This is largely for the maintenance tech position out
Yeah.
there, so that they might be going to a shop picking up rebuilt motors and things like that. Right now, they're using their personal vehicles, and it just doesn't seem right that they should be,
Yeah,
putting that kind of
yeah,
stuff
I
in their
agree.
vehicle.
No.
But it's not, I think, even our vehicle use policy is pretty much full-time staff. So I mean, some of the other full-time staff up there might use it from time to time.
When they run the
but-
deposit.
but-
Yeah,
City
yeah.
Hall.
But we're not talking lifeguards and.
Yeah.
No.
But we are.
Here's the
covered.
keys, have fun.
Right? See
don't
them with
wanna-
the Covington truck driving down King.
Oh, we're not gonna label this one. We don't want people knowing it's ours.
We're gonna take the seahorse for a ride.
We're putting
just
Maple
don't-
Valley on it.
I don't want to get a report that it's now floating in our pool.
I mean,
Just the tailgate.
so I think that if there's no other changes the council wants to see, we're pretty close to a final budget then.
That's
I'll bring these
amazing.
changes back. on
Yeah, we'll
the
bring all these
board.
changes back to council. We've got another public hearing.
I've got
Two
two more
more.
public hearings.
Yep. So,
I think,
Okay.
did you have something, Beth?
Round of applause.
Yes, Beth.
do we have any, specific need, the town center is going up by $1 million, right? That's the
Mhm.
proposal. Is there anything specifically we know that we're gonna need that for? That went up to, or about 3 million, 3.9 million in that fund now?
We don't have any specific expenditures in the budget right now for that. But we know that if the council wants to develop a town center, we're going to need money. And so that's what it's there for at this point, but no expenditures right now for it. Yeah, I mean, design could be a next option, but
But we don't know when that.
we're not there yet. Yeah.
Yeah, and depending on where the Aquatic Center goes, because that's the #1 choice, some of that money for the town center can be used towards
Right.
design for that.
Yeah.
If that's the decision of where we put.
It'd be
the-
a great bump for those businesses, because I know when I
Yep.
drop my kids off at the pool, I bop on down to Bugsy's Soaps, because that's right there by the
Mhm.
pool, and, because it's half an hour. It's
Yeah.
It's a great time to pop in and do errands.
Yep. So. Okay, any other questions or anything? Well, I guess that's everything. So thank you all very much for being here today. Thank you, staff, for all the hard work and the planning of this budget and bringing it to us for a very conservative, balanced budget, fiscally responsible. So really appreciate that from each of you for that. And council, thank you for some great deliberations today. So with that, our meeting is adjourned, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your Saturday, and happy Halloween to everybody. Thank you.